Chapter 629. In the dense forest at the back of the ninth summit, Hun Dun appeared. The evil face behind him was ferocious and terrifying. When Air saw who it was, she was shocked. Without another word, she turned around and ran. The man took a step forward. Under the moonlight, the eyes of the evil face of Hun Dun were bone-chilling. It was like the greediest beast, choosing its prey to devour. On the various peaks, the 4 disciples of Mo clan who had just watched the fierce battle were still in shock. No one noticed the change in the ninth summit. At Legacy Peak, Mo clan master returned to the Dao platform. At this moment, he looked at the ninth summit, and a glint flashed across his old eyes. At the same time, Black Robe walked alone in the dark space. The cold and eerie world around him made him shudder. When he looked around, there was nothing around him. It was abnormally quiet and he could not hear any movement. Ningchen released his divine consciousness and walked forward while paying attention to the changes in his surroundings. The distorted space made it difficult for people to feel the flow of time. After walking for an unknown period of time, the surroundings were still quiet and there was no sign of life. The strange space and time seemed strange, but Ningchen was not unfamiliar with it. In fact, he was very familiar with it. Hun Dun, Phoenix, Tao. The seeds in their bellies were the innate abilities of some of the top divine beasts in aristocratic families. Among them, Tao Tai and Hun Dun were the best at devouring all things and turning them into their own bodies. He walked forward and there was no end in sight. There was only endless silence that trapped him. After taking a few more steps, he suddenly saw heavy rain falling from the sky. The ground was covered in fog and the sizzling sound of corrosion was endless. Ningchen composed himself and a red sword light shot out. It crisscrossed and blocked the poisonous rain. In the rain, Black Robe's aura surged and his divine consciousness spread out in all directions. The poisonous rain fell faster and faster, blurring his vision and drowning his Black Robe. Suddenly, Ningchen stopped and looked to the side with narrowed eyes. In the heavy rain, a valley could be vaguely seen in the distance. Even from afar, he could see the terrifying traces of corrosion on the mountain. Without hesitation, Ningchen's figure flashed out and headed straight for the valley. There was a rumble. At this moment, thunder rumbled in the sky and disrupted his thoughts. In the valley, corpses were everywhere. The huge rocks on the mountain blocked the rain and many of the corpses had not been completely corroded. In front of him, all the skeletons were gathered under the cliffs and boulders. It seemed that they had been devoured when they were alive and were squeezed under the cliffs to avoid the poisonous rain. Rumbling sounds could be heard as one of the cliffs in the valley could no longer withstand the erosion of the rain. It fell from the sky and crashed into the ground. In an instant, the rain drowned the white bones, and in a few breaths of time, a large number of bones were completely corroded. Rumble! Another huge rock crashed down, and even more bones were exposed to the poisonous rain. Not long after, they disappeared into the curtain of rain. Shocking scenes could be seen everywhere. It was unknown just how many creatures were buried in the belly of primal chaos. At this moment, they were buried under the rain. The cliffs, which had been corroded by the poisonous rain over the years, fell from time to time. The earth rumbled and shook. After an unknown period of time, the rain gradually stopped. Around Ningchen's body, the streaks of sword light that were coiling around him dissipated and retreated back into his body. The valley was so deep that he couldn't see the end of it. Ningchen walked forward and looked around with his deep eyes. He felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't tell why. It was obvious that everything in this world of Messen had been corroded by the poisonous rain. The only thing that still existed was this crumbling valley. However, why would there be such a huge valley in the belly of primal chaos? If it wanted to devour creatures to increase its power, it would have chosen a human city. After walking for a long time, blood stains appeared on a cliff where the rain couldn't reach. They seeped into the cliff and turned dark brown with the passage of time. Ningchen squinted his eyes. It was the blood of a warrior. Judging from the degree of corrosion, this place had existed for at least 100 years. The blood of ordinary people and creatures would have been completely corroded. Not even a trace would be left behind. Seeing the warrior's blood, Ningchen became more suspicious. He followed the bloodstains and walked forward step by step, looking for the truth that had been hidden by the passage of time. There were more and more bloodstains on the road ahead. It was obvious that the warrior's injuries were getting worse and worse. A large pool of blood seeped into the cliff. Finally, a few blood-stained words appeared under a concave cliff. They were clear and dazzling. "I'm going to die. What should I do? I have a younger sister who is not even 8 years old. I can't die. Who can save me?" It was a miserable scene 100 years ago. The young warrior kept coughing up blood and used his blood to carve words on the cliff again and again. He hoped that someone would see them and save his life. The despair and helplessness in the words were very clear. The young warrior was worried about his younger sister, so he bitterly held on, unwilling to give up. In front of him, a bloody handprint could be vaguely seen on the bloody cliff. The young warrior walked forward, coughing up blood every 3 steps. He held onto the cliff and struggled to move forward. "Who can save me?" The young warrior kept coughing up blood. With every step he took, he was 1 step closer to the underworld. Ningchen looked at the blood stains on the cliff, and his eyes became increasingly deep. What happened 100 years ago? Who was the owner of the words? Did the primal chaos swallow the entire valley because of this person? There were other hidden reasons. "I can't die." At the end of the valley, the last blood stains fell. It was a helpless desolation. No matter how worried he was, he still couldn't prevent death from coming. The figure that fell at the end of the valley still hoped that someone would save him. He hoped that a miracle would happen. However, a miracle was still a miracle. It existed in legends, but it didn't exist in the real world. The corpse was corroded by the rain, and only a skull was left. It was white and dazzling. Huayang. When he saw the skull, Ning Chen's body trembled. A sense of being a cultivator of the sun scripture rose from the bottom of his heart. After 100 years, it was still unusually clear. With a wave of his hand, a green light flashed, and a jade pendant appeared. It was Huayang's relic that he found at the back of the 9th summit. Looking at the jade pendant in his hand, Ning Chen's eyes flashed. Thoughts kept running in his mind, and he could vaguely guess what had happened that year. Without a doubt, when Huayang was still in the 9th summit, he already knew that he was going to die, so he built a cenotaph for himself in advance. As for what happened after that, he still didn't know. However, he could guess that after that, Huayang must have fought with someone and was severely injured. When he escaped to this valley, he was already on the verge of death. These words were clearly written by Huayang when he was about to die. However, in the end, no one came to save him. From the words written in blood on the cliff, it could be seen how unwilling and helpless Huayang was at that time. The ties to his family made him unable to die in peace. 100 years had passed. Huayang's younger sister should have long since passed away, just like the truth that was buried before his eyes. It would be difficult to find her again. As the master of the 9th summit, I will let you rest in peace. 100 years ago, no one came to save you. 100 years later, I will bury your bones and send you to the Yellow Springs. Ning Chen bowed and stepped the skull into the ground at the bottom of the cliff. Then, yellow soil sprinkled on top of the skull and buried it. The yellow soil covered the white bones. The former master of the 9th summit was finally buried after 100 years. Ning Chen stood up and was about to leave the valley when he suddenly stopped. A fierce glint appeared in his eyes. At the back of the 9th summit, Air was running for her life. Her face was filled with panic. Behind her, the man chased after her step by step. He didn't seem to be fast, but he followed closely behind her. "You can't escape." As he spoke, a powerful palm energy roared out and landed on the girl's back. When the palm energy reached her, a red light rose. It lasted for a moment before it collapsed. Air flew hundreds of feet away and crashed into a huge tree. She spat out a mouthful of blood and dyed the ground in front of her red. "You're just at the acquired stage, but you have such great power in your body. You really make me happy." The man walked forward and condensed his origin energy with a flip of his palm. Endless devouring power spread out and reached for the girl. At the moment of danger, the red sword in Air's hand shone brightly and automatically protected its master. A stunning sword light cut through the night and collided with the man's palm. There was a loud explosion. The ninth summit shook violently. The red sword shattered and blocked the fatal palm. At the end of the valley in the Meson space, Ning Chen sensed the destruction of the red sword he personally made. His expression darkened. Without hesitation, he activated the yellow springs and his demonic aura surged into the sky. Chaos swallowed the heavens. Rivers, seas, mountains, and rivers could all refine one's body. However, everything had an end and a limit. The Meson space was the same. Ning Chen released the heavenly demonic power in his body. Demonic waves spread rapidly, trying to forcibly open this world. In the dense forest, the man's expression changed. His aura surged and his three souls gathered and entered his Meson space. In the endless demonic waves, the void swirled. The man walked out and looked at the demon in front of him. His eyes darkened. "You're a demon." "Yes, so what?" The demon opened his eyes. His violent aura surged. His cold and emotionless eyes were filled with darkness. Before he finished speaking, his figure disappeared. The red sword appeared and cut through the 9 heavens. It could kill a god with a single strike. The man flipped his palm and a vast amount of origin energy rose. He forcefully grabbed the red sword. "Stupid!" A mocking voice rang out. The red sword in the demon's hand smashed down and sent the man flying. The demon did not stop. He rushed forward again. His sword was like a falling mountain as it slashed at the man. As the sword approached, the chaotic evil image roared. An ancient primordial force spread out and collided with the heavenly demonic power. With a rumble, the aftermath surged. The demon grew 10 feet tall and suppressed the chaotic evil image. Half of the man's body was buried in the ground. The man's face was ferocious. He transformed into his original form and the chaotic evil image returned to its original position. The chaotic evil image appeared. A huge body like a small mountain rose up and shook the world. When the demon saw this, the red sword in his hand disappeared. He roared at the sky and his body changed rapidly. After obtaining Xian Luo's memories, he used the heavenly demonic divine power for the first time. The 300 feet tall demon stood upright and stepped on the chaotic evil image. "If you dare to hurt her, you'll have to pay with your life." The demon's foot stepped down and exploded. The ground within 1,000 miles collapsed. Huge cracks crisscrossed and reached the end of the Meson space. Under the demon's foot, the mountain-like chaotic evil image was buried in the ground. Blood flowed and dyed the ground red. Chapter 630. In the Meson space, the fierce beast and the demonic body fought. Chaos took form, and the heavenly demon appeared. With a stomp, Chaos was heavily injured. Blood flowed and dyed the ground red. The evil Chaos roared and struggled. The 1,000-foot-tall demonic body was surrounded by black gas. It stepped on Chaos with demonic runes on its face, exuding a terrifying demonic aura. The terrifying demonic body revealed its shocking abilities. Even gods and Buddhas could not shake it. Under the demonic body's feet, Chaos roared again. Its body scattered and turned into mist, escaping from the ground. 1,000 feet away, the mist gathered. Chaos appeared, and a series of sharp and ear-piercing roars came from its mouth. The next moment, Chaos opened its mouth, and a thick black light surged out, shaking the sky and the earth. The black light approached, but the demonic body did not dodge. Instead, it punched out and directly shattered the attack. At the moment when the attack was broken, the demonic body instantly stepped forward and punched Chaos into the ground again. Blood sprayed out like rain, dyeing the sky and the dust red. It was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. Roars echoed between heaven and earth. Chaos struggled to get up, but it was directly stepped on by a large foot. Demonic aura spread, and its ability to turn into mist was immediately suppressed. "Spare me!" The difference in strength was irreversible. Chaos panicked and finally gave in, begging for mercy. The demonic body acted as if it did not hear anything. It stomped harder, and a waterfall of blood sprayed out. It was as if it was just stepping on an ant. There was no change in its expression. "Don't kill me. I'm willing to serve you as my master. Please." Sensing the impending death, Hun Dun was terrified and wailed. Hearing this, the demonic body paused and said, "Bring in the little girl that you wanted to kill just now." Chaos quickly nodded and opened its mouth. The void in front of it shook violently, and the little girl's figure fell and landed on the ground. Her blood-stained clothes were torn into several pieces. The little girl's eyes were closed, and blood dripped from the corner of her mouth. She looked extremely miserable. Seeing In-er's appearance, endless killing intent erupted from the demonic body's eyes. With a stomp, the ground within 1,000 miles collapsed. Ah! There was an earth-shattering scream. Blood spurted out hundreds of feet from Chaos and flowed down the cracks in the ground. The sound of blood splashing could be heard clearly. "Don't kill me. I'm willing to do anything." It was pleading in panic and fear. Primal Chaos kept pleading and begging to be spared. The demonic body coldly snorted. The demonic chi around its body gathered and it returned to its original form. Then, a vast amount of phoenix essence poured into the little girl's body to heal her injuries. Not long after, T-er woke up. When she saw the familiar figure in front of her, the grievance, fear, and worry in her heart instantly erupted. She hugged the figure and started crying. "Where did you go? You promised not to leave me alone again." The little girl's body trembled as she cried. She had lost him once, so she was extremely afraid of being abandoned again. Ning Chen patted the little girl's back. After a long time, he softly said, "It's Master's fault. Don't cry. Master will give you something." "What is it?" Tired from crying, lifted her small face from the former's embrace, wiped her tears and asked, "Follow me and you'll know." Ning Chen held the little girl's hand and walked towards Primal Chaos. Looking at the huge beast in front of him, he coldly said, "I'll give you a way out now. Serve her as your master and I'll spare your life. Otherwise, this will be your burial ground." Primal Chaos glanced at the little girl, and a trace of unwillingness flashed in its eyes. It said, "I am Primal Chaos. How can I serve a mortal as my master?" It had lost to the person in front of it, but it was fine to serve her as its master. After all, this was a world where the strong ruled. It was acceptable to submit to the strong, but to make it bow in front of a mortal was a disgrace to its name as Primal Chaos. Hearing the former's answer, a trace of murderous intent flashed in Ning Chen's eyes. He said, "Then you choose to die?" Demonic chi surged around Ning Chen, and a strong murderous intent surged. It was boundless and could drive people crazy. "No, I'm willing to serve her as my master." Seeing the demonic body's murderous intent, Primal Chaos trembled. It did not dare to persist and compromised. "Then give me your soul," Ning Chen said coldly. Then he raised his hand and pressed it on Primal Chaos's huge head. A majestic demonic chi erupted and pulled out one of the latter's souls. With one of its souls taken, Primal Chaos roared in pain, and its body trembled violently. Ning Chen turned his palm and condensed Yuan Qi. The Yellow Springs seal trapped Primal Chaos soul, and then sent it into the little girl's Dantian Sea of Qi. "I've sealed one of its souls in your body. If it tries to rebel against its master, destroy its soul immediately," Ning Chen said directly in front of Primal Chaos. Anger flashed in Primal Chaos' eyes, but it did not dare to say anything. Feeling the additional soul in her body, looked at the mountain-like monster in front of her curiously. She asked, "Why did you hit me just now? I didn't provoke you." Primal Chaos was silent and did not answer. Ning Chen thought of the incident in the valley and said, "I have something to ask you. 100 years ago, were you the one who killed Huayang?" "No," Primal Chaos shook its head. "Then who did it?" Ning Chen continued to ask. "I don't know," Primal Chaos replied. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "I can't say." Primal Chaos' body stiffened and changed its words. "Why can't I say?" Ning Chen asked coldly. "The power of the law. If I say anything I'll die," Primal Chaos said truthfully. Ning Chen frowned and said, "How can there be such a law in this world?" Primal Chaos was silent. After a while, it said, "This is not the law of heaven and earth, but the law of a true realm expert." "There are true realm experts in this world?" Ning Chen asked seriously. Primal Chaos nodded. Ning Chen fell into deep thought when he heard the former's reply. After a short moment, he raised his head and said indifferently, "Send us out. Remember, there's only a bitter battle between us that hasn't been decided. You haven't seen anything, understand?" "I understand," Primal Chaos replied sensibly. As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding space shook. The three of them disappeared and returned to the outside world. Ning Chen held the little girl's hand and left. Primal Chaos took human form and looked at the two of them in the distance. Its eyes were full of unwillingness, but it could no longer change this fact. An hour later, in the bamboo forest hut, Ning Chen picked a great medicine from the third peak. He used his true essence to dissolve the medicine and help the little girl's body recuperate. Ymir sat on the bed and looked at the person in front of her with big eyes. She said, "Ning Chen, my sword is broken." Ning Chen sat quietly by the bed and fed the medicine into her mouth. When he heard the little girl's words, he said calmly, "If it's broken, it's broken. Just make another one." "Oh," Ymir replied. After thinking for a while, she said, "When you weren't here just now, that purple Marquis came again and fought with Master Mo." When Ning Chen heard this, his hand that was holding the spoon paused. He raised his head and asked, "He didn't die? What was the final result?" "I don't know. I went to the back of the mountain at that time and didn't see it," Ymir replied. Ning Chen nodded and didn't ask any more. He continued to feed the little girl the medicine. The fact that Purple Marquis didn't die in the Western immortal world was out of his expectations. However, Master Mo's strength was clearly much higher than the former. The result this time shouldn't be too different from 100 years ago. On Yu Peak, Master Mo closed his eyes and pondered. At this moment, the void swirled and a white gauze sedan appeared. Its powerful aura caused the surrounding space to violently tremble. Master Mo opened his eyes and looked at the figure in the sedan. He slowly said, "It's you. Long time no see, Master Mo. How have you been?" The woman in the sedan calmly said, "Why have you come?" Asked Master Mo. "Hong Wan is about to get married. I've come to deliver an invitation to Master." The woman waved her hand and a red streak of light flew towards the Dao stage. Master Mo received the invitation and indifferently said, "It's enough to send someone. Why do you have to personally come?" Master Mo's status is different from ordinary people. "Only by personally coming can I show my sincerity," the woman softly replied. Master Mo was silent. After a moment, he said, "I will be there on time." With Master Mo's words, I can rest assured. It's getting late, so I'll take my leave first. As soon as she finished speaking, the space around the sedan began to swirl once more. In an instant, the white sedan entered the void and disappeared. Master Mo looked at the space that had returned to normal. A trace of emotion flashed through his aged eyes. 800 years had passed in the blink of an eye, but she hadn't changed at all. On planet Hong Wan, in the king domain guarded by various sects, there were majestic palaces standing tall. This ancient secret realm had existed for an unknown number of years. After experiencing the rise and fall of generations, it had been passed down to this day and was nearly immortal. The king domain was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. The day of Princess Hong Wan's wedding was approaching. The entire secret realm was bustling with noise and excitement. The king domain's biggest wedding in 100 years was bustling. Hong Yi stood in front of a quiet palace. Even though she had lost her memories, her nature of liking peace hadn't changed. Looking at the busy secret realm, the confusion in her eyes became clearer. "What are you thinking about?" Not far away, a woman wearing a long dress walked over. Her appearance was flawless and her temperament was extraordinary. She was like a person from a painting. Perhaps only words like captivating the birds and beasts and outshining the moon and flowers could be described. Nothing. The phoenix body came back to her senses. Looking at the woman in front of her, she asked, "How many more days?" "What? Are you regretting it?" Princess Hong Wan didn't answer. The phoenix body remained silent and didn't answer. Princess Hong Wan didn't continue to ask. Changing the topic, she said, "I know you've always wanted to remember your past, but this matter can't be rushed. You have to take it step by step. There will be a day when you will remember your past. The phoenix body nodded. Thinking for a moment, she said calmly, there are many geniuses on planet Hong Luan. Why did you choose me? Princess Hong Luan sighed softly and said, actually, I'm also very curious. You've already lost your memories, but why can you still look at yourself and others so calmly? Being overly rational isn't a good thing. I'm used to it. The phoenix body replied. Princess Hong Luan looked into the distance and said, I can give you the answer to your question. With my status, do you think that other than this word, there is anything else that can affect my decision? I don't know where love comes from, but I'm deeply in love. Ning Chen's eyes were filled with confusion. Princess Hong Luan came back to her senses. Her body trembled. Looking at the young man beside her, her beautiful eyes flashed with surprise. Was he talking to her? Chapter 631. On the Red Luan planet, Princess Hong Luan was getting married. The Red Luan King's domain, which had been quiet for many years, was no longer as low-key as before. In just a few days, they sent out nearly 100 invitations to various planets. In the king's domain, as the day of the wedding approached, it gradually became lively. Young men and women came and went, making the final preparations for the princess wedding. Many guests had already arrived in advance. Wild beasts pulled carriages loaded with rare treasures as gifts. In front of a quiet palace, the phoenix body became more and more silent. He didn't care about what was happening outside. Ever since he returned from the Western Celestial Domain, he hadn't walked out of his palace for several months. Princess Hong Luan came several times, and each time she left, there was a strange expression between her brows. The Red Luan mind bewitching technique had never failed in its inheritance. Those who were bewitched couldn't break free for their entire lives. Even ascending immortals were the same. However, she clearly saw something in his eyes that shouldn't be there. Was it because of his rationality that he began to doubt himself? The Red Luan mind bewitching technique bestowed love, resentment, affection, and hatred. Although they were only illusory emotions, they were incomparably close to reality. It was hard to believe that a person would doubt his own emotions. This was the first time she had seen such a monster. In front of the palace, Hong Luan stood quietly. With a faintly discernible phoenix cry, the phoenix manifested. A crystal coffin made of ice flew out and landed in front of her. The woman in the coffin wore a red wedding dress that was as bright as blood. Her charming face was too perfect. She didn't look like a mortal. She had feelings and willingly fell into the abyss. Looking at the woman in the coffin, guilt and sadness rose in the phoenix body's eyes. The unforgettable pain didn't change even after losing her memories. Mo Planet, EU Peak. Mo Clan's 5 sons soon appeared from their peaks and respectfully stood in front of the platform. Princess Hong Luan's wedding. I've specially sent someone to deliver an invitation. I've already prepared a generous gift. Which one of you will go? Mo Clan looked at the 5 sons and said, I'll go. Chi Huan walked out and answered. Mo Clan nodded and waved his hand to send out a brocade box. The gift is in the box. Remember to personally hand it to the Red Luan Realm's king. Also, according to rumors, her husband once obtained the inheritance of the phoenix. When you go, make a trip to the Fire Nation and ask for 10 fire essences in my name. Yes. Chi Huan took the box and said respectfully. Below the platform, Ning Chen's body trembled slightly when he heard the word phoenix. He immediately took half a step forward and said, Master, can you allow disciple to go with 5th senior brother? Why? A wisp of doubt flashed through Master Mo's brows as he asked. Princess Hong Luan's prince consort might be an old friend that disciple has been looking for a long time, Ning Chen replied. Mo Zhu thought for a moment before nodding. Since that's the case, you can go with old 5th. Many thanks, Master, Ning Chen said respectfully. The 2 of you should go and prepare. Old 6, Old 7, and Old 8, you 3 stay behind, said Mo Zhu calmly. Yes. The 2 of them bowed in unison before turning around and leaving. Outside the legacy peak, Chi Huan looked at the young man beside him and said, 9th junior brother, I'll be waiting for you at the 5th peak. We'll leave immediately once you're ready. Ning Chen nodded and charged towards the ninth summit. In the bamboo house in front of the forest on the ninth summit, Wu was sitting at the door in a daze. As she had just recovered from her serious injuries, her body was still a little weak, so she did not practice her sword. Ning Chen walked over and looked at the little girl in front of the bamboo house. Get ready. We're going out. Wu came back to her senses and asked in confusion, where are we going? Planet Hongwan, to search for the phoenix body, Ning Chen replied. Hearing this, Wu immediately stood up and said, I'll go and pack now. After saying that, the little girl turned around and ran into the house to pack her bottles and jars. Not long after, a big bag of things was packed. Wu carried the big bag and walked forward. Help me carry it. Ning Chen nodded and waved his hand to send the bag into the mess space. Are we the only ones going? Wu asked. Qi Huan is coming too, Ning Chen replied softly. What about Sister Ling Luo? Wu continued to ask. She's not going. Moreover, Master Mo has asked the other three to stay behind. There might be other matters, Ning Chen replied. Oh. Wu replied. It was a pity. If only Sister Ling Luo was going with them. After packing up, the two of them didn't delay any longer and walked towards the fifth peak. On the fifth peak, Qi Huan saw the two of them walk over. His figure flashed and he appeared in front of them. Senior apprentice brother, said Ning Chen. Let's go to the Fire Nation first. Qi Huan nodded. Ning Chen gently nodded and followed along with Wu. Several thousand miles north of Mount Mo was the Fire Nation. It was one of Mo planet's most ancient inheritances. It had a long history that even surpassed Mo Gate. However, Master Mo's cultivation was the strongest in Mo planet. No matter how long the Fire Nation's history was, they had no choice but to submit. The Fire Nation's territory couldn't be considered large. It was different from a country in the traditional sense. It was more like a pure land. There were martial artists everywhere, and Xiantian experts weren't rare. The three of them arrived at the Fire Nation and directly walked towards Yen City where the Fire Nation's master resided. Ninth Junior Apprentice Brother, once you reach Yen City, you must not act blindly without thinking. The Fire Nation's master is not someone easy to deal with. Even with Master's face, asking for the flame essence won't go too smoothly, reminded Qi Huan. Ning Chen nodded, a strange light flashing in his eyes. It seemed that Master Mo's request for the flame essence was only an excuse. His true goal was likely not here. At the center of the Fire Nation, Yen City was a lone city in a wasteland. Earth veins crisscrossed the surroundings, and the flow of earth fire was clearly visible. Within several hundred miles, the fire essence was extremely rich. Even before entering the city, they could feel the heat waves blowing against their faces. It was rumored that the majority of the Fire Nation's citizens cultivated martial arts, and their physiques were also different from ordinary people's. They were able to endure the extremely hot weather that ordinary people found difficult to endure. As soon as the three of them entered the city, they immediately attracted the attention of quite a few people. They cautiously observed their movements. Ning Chen sensed the gazes of those people, but he didn't care. They weren't planning on hiding their identities, so whether or not others recognized them wasn't important. If he hadn't guessed wrong, Master Mo's goal was likely to be to test whether or not the Fire Nation's master had any thoughts of betrayal. He had heard that flame essences were born in the flame domain, and the process of condensing them was extremely slow. Even the Fire Nation couldn't have too many of them. If Master Mo asked for 10 at once, then as long as he had the slightest bit of disloyalty, he wouldn't easily agree. Fifth Senior Apprentice Brother, if you fought with the Fire Nation's master, who would have a higher chance of winning? Ning Chen asked the person beside him. The Fire Nation's imperial palace was already within reach. Master Mo, Qi Huan honestly said, the Fire Nation's master stepped into the immortal realm 100 years before me. His cultivation is unfathomably deep. Even if he hasn't stepped into the corporeal realm, my chances of winning are less than 30%. Fifth Senior Apprentice Brother, have you ever thought about how we'd deal with the Fire Nation's master if he decided to make trouble for us? Ning Chen continued asking. That shouldn't be the case. The Fire Nation's master has always been somewhat afraid of Honorable Master. Unless it's absolutely necessary, it's unlikely that he would completely tear apart all decorum with Mo Gate, replied Chi Huan. Just as the two of them arrived at Yen City, 1,000 miles to the west of the Fire Nation was Mo City. Within a quiet mansion, a green-robed woman was focused on crushing medicine. Her face was covered in sweat, and she looked just like an ordinary Yao family girl. Not long after, a man walked in from outside the courtyard. Seeing the woman still crushing medicine, he said, "Just now, the Fire Nation's master sent word that Chi Huan and the Ninth Peak's new disciple have already arrived at Yen City. They must have received orders from that old fellow." "So what?" The green-robed woman didn't even raise her head. She continued crushing medicine as she indifferently replied, "Aren't you curious as to why Chi Huan and the others are going to Yen City?" asked the man curiously. "Probing," the green-robed woman replied. "Probing what?" The man frowned. "The Fire Nation's loyalty and stance." The green-robed woman stood up and placed the medicine she had just crushed to the side. Then she picked up some other herbs and continued crushing them. "Are you saying that that old fellow is already prepared to take action against the Fire Nation's master?" asked the man. "Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we continue watching. The Fire Nation's master has received too much help from us these past few years, and his wings have gradually grown. How could that old fellow not be suspicious? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. With the Fire Nation causing trouble for him, we can better hide our identities." "It's worth it," said the man. While the two of them were talking, a purple-robed figure appeared at the entrance of the courtyard. When he saw the two of them, he respectfully bowed. "Looks like your injuries have pretty much healed. Next time, don't be so impulsive as to seek death. Right now, you're still far from being that old fellow's match. It's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. You've already endured for 100 years. Is it really that difficult to endure for a few more years?" The green-robed woman raised her head and glanced at him. Purple Marquis was silent. He didn't dare to refute her. "Come and dry these herbs in a cool place," said the green-robed woman. "Yes." Purple Marquis nodded and walked forward to help her. His usually domineering personality was restrained at this moment. He didn't dare to say anything. There might be some trouble with the Fire Nation's master in the next few days. "Make a trip there. Remember, don't hurt anyone," said the green-robed woman. "Yes," replied Purple Marquis once again. "It's a bit inappropriate. This time, if that old fellow personally takes action, the chances of ZE going will be very low," said the man worriedly. "He hasn't left the leaving message peak for several hundred years. This time should be the same. If it's only a clone, then there's nothing to worry about," said the green-robed woman calmly. "I'll leave as soon as possible," said Purple Marquis. "There's no need to rush. The Fire Nation's master can handle Chi Huan alone. What you need to deal with are the other 3 people, especially that Ling Luozhen. She's at the late stage of extreme yin. Once she goes crazy, even you won't be able to handle her," reminded the green-robed woman. "Can I kill her?" asked Purple Marquis after a moment of silence. "No," said the green-robed woman. "She's already at the peak of the emptiness realm. Her chances of surviving are low. Dying by my hands might be a better result," said Purple Marquis. "Zichuan, don't think that you can forget everything just because you changed your name. That's your junior sister. This matter will never change. Her life and death isn't up to you to decide. Don't make me look down on you," said the green-robed woman coldly. Purple Marquis once again became silent. He didn't dare to say anything else. Chapter 632. In Yen City, the 3 of them walked towards the Fire Nation's Imperial Palace without saying a word. The Imperial Palace in front of them did not look majestic, nor did it have the splendor of an imperial dynasty in the mortal world. The ancient building was filled with the aura of time, and from afar, one could feel an extraordinary pressure. The Fire Nation worshipped martial arts and had many strong cultivators. The Fire Nation's ruler was a treading celestial, and his cultivation was unfathomable. Some people said that the current Fire Nation's ruler was the strongest person under the Mo Nation's ruler. Although it was a bit exaggerated, It was enough to show how powerful the ruler of the Fire Nation was. The fire essence that the three of them wanted to obtain was born in the Fire Nation's fire domain. Only the Fire Nation's ruler knew how to enter the fire domain. Therefore, if they wanted to obtain the fire essence, they first had to face the strongest cultivator in the Fire Nation's imperial palace. In front of the imperial palace, there were not many guards, and it was not as strict as the imperial dynasty in the mortal world. However, even so, no one dared to enter without permission. After all, no one wanted to offend a treading celestial. Out of politeness, Qi Huan and Ning Chen reported their identities and waited quietly outside the imperial palace. After waiting for a long time, the guard who went to report finally came back and brought the three of them in. Ning Chen held Yinu's hand and followed behind Qi Huan. Looking at the layout of the surroundings, his eyes narrowed. They could not see clearly from the outside, but after entering, they could feel that this imperial palace was not ordinary. Although it did not look like an imperial dynasty in the mortal world, the layout of the palaces was full of surprises. It could be imagined that the person who was in charge of building this imperial palace had an excellent understanding of arrays. "We've arrived. Please, my king is waiting inside." In front of the imperial palace, the guard stopped and said respectfully. Qi Huan nodded and thanked him. He looked at the palace in front of him and reminded him, "Ninth junior brother, be careful later." Ning Chen calmly agreed and walked forward with him. The three of them entered the palace. In the main hall, a middle-aged man with a dignified appearance was sitting quietly. He was wearing a red imperial robe, and there was hot air swirling around him, making it difficult for people to get close. Junior Qi Huan greets the Fire Nation's ruler. Qi Huan stepped forward and bowed politely. On his seat, the Fire Nation's ruler looked down at the people below without saying a word. His cold eyes were filled with disdain. Qi Huan was mentally prepared, so his complexion was as calm as ever. He didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. "Ninth junior apprentice brother and I have come under the orders of our honorable master to ask for 10 flame essences. We hope that Fire Lord can grant us this." "Master," the Fire Master coldly smiled and said, "Do you know how important a flame essence is to my Fire Nation? How could we give it away just because of a few words from you?" "Fire Master, you can state your conditions," Qi Huan said indifferently. "There is no need. It is absolutely impossible for me to give away the flame essence. Please return." The Fire Lord's tone was unyielding. "Can't we discuss it?" Qi Huan narrowed his eyes. "No," said the Fire Master coldly. "That's a pity." Qi Huan flipped his left hand and green beads flew out, turning into a wheel that spun around him. An icy cold aura circulated, and the temperature in the hall suddenly dropped. Snowflakes condensed and fell from the sky. "I have a whole new level of respect for your courage to cause trouble in the royal palace." Seeing this, the Fire Master stood up. Immediately, waves of heat surged through the hall and flames began to burn. Outside the palace, when they saw that the Fire Master had made his move, many figures walked out of thin air and appeared to protect him. "Ninth junior apprentice brother, stop them," said Qi Huan. "Yes." Ning Chen nodded and walked to the entrance of the hall. He waved his right hand, and Taisha appeared. With a single sword in hand, he dared to block 10,000 men. Stood behind him, her hands tugging on his sleeves. She was more excited than nervous. In the same hall, there were two battlefields. Mo Gates twins were joining hands to resist the Fire Nation's power. The battle was about to begin, and the heavy atmosphere continued to spread. The 13 figures that had come to protect the Fire Emperor all pulled out their blades. Their figures flashed, and they began the battle at an extremely fast speed. With a clanging sound, the blades collided, and the shockwaves surged out. One blade passed, followed by another. There was a tacit understanding between attack and defense, and there were no openings. In the intertwining battle, the three Perfection Realm leaders' blades danced like the autumn rain. It was continuous and unending, causing people to sigh in admiration. When Mo Gates twins attacked, the 13 Imperial Guards revealed their abilities, stunning the world. However, the black-robed figure in front of them was as unmoving as a mountain. Taisher's sword swept, swung, chopped, and stabbed. The simplest moves blocked the 13 Imperial Guards' attacks. In the blink of an eye, they had exchanged more than 10 moves. The 13 Imperial Guards who seemed to have the upper hand were unable to take a single step forward. 3 feet in front of the black-robed figure was a forbidden area. Inside the hall, the Fire Master saw that the two of them were extraordinary. He took a step forward, and his palms split open the wind and clouds. The Fire Master attacked, and Qi Huan moved as well. A vast and boundless palm met the attack. The two palms collided, and the wind and clouds went berserk. Ice and fire clashed violently, and the world constantly changed color. The battle between the two ascending immortals immediately turned into a blazing white. Furious waves surged endlessly. For a moment, the entire palace was filled with light. Strange runes appeared one after another, and the power of a powerful formation constantly absorbed the spiritual qi of the world. It actually forcefully protected the palace in the battle. The moment the formation was activated, Ning Chen and Qi Huan both felt their bodies sink. An indescribable pressure came from all directions, and their bodies were immediately suppressed by 30%. Qi Huan frowned. The green frost pearls around him spun rapidly, turning into streams of light that crashed into the person in front of him. The Fire Master did not dare to be careless. He turned his palm to gather fire essence and blocked the spiritual pearls with all his might. With a violent tremor, the green frost pearls broke through the fire essence. The strange spiritual pearls were not affected by the palm power, and they crashed into the former's chest. With a groan, the Fire Master retreated several steps. He was the first to be injured. Not bad. The Fire Master shouted as he lost the battle. Streams of light danced around his body, and a fiery red halberd descended from the sky. Endless fire essence roared violently. With a flash of brilliance, the flaming halberd slashed down, and a powerful flame aura erupted. Qi Huan focused. The moment his palm moved, the green frost pearls coiled up. Cold air surged, and it met the flaming halberd head-on. With an earth-shattering tremor, the remaining shockwaves swept out in all directions. The green frost pearls were not affected by the fire essence, and they broke through the attack again. At the last moment, they were blocked by the flaming halberd, and they could not advance any further. So, this treasure can only break through true origin. The Fire Master sneered. True origin gathered in his arms, and the flaming halberd slashed down, and the spiritual pearls were knocked away. With the remaining shockwaves, Qi Huan retreated 3 steps. The 9 green frost pearls returned to him, spinning around him. In Yen City, I am the absolute ruler. Your struggles are foolish. As soon as he finished speaking, the Fire Master's halberd slammed into the ground, and his aura continued to rise. In an instant, fire essence rapidly gathered from all directions. Below Yen City, the earth-fire spiritual veins shook, and fire essence broke through the ground, flowing towards the Yen City Palace. The shocking scene shocked everyone. With the advantage of the terrain, the Fire Master's cultivation rose rapidly. In a short moment, he broke through the limits of the emptiness realm and stepped into the second stage of the treading immortal realm. Feeling the change behind him, Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. He pushed back the 13 experts in front of him, and his figure flashed, and the tip of his sword pierced through the air. Impudent! The Fire Master opened his eyes, and a furious current surged, blocking the deadly sword light. Then, he turned his palm and condensed vast origin energy, slamming it towards the former. When the palm origin energy arrived, the black-robed man moved again. With an extremely fast movement technique and an extremely fast sword, he avoided the palm energy and once again stabbed towards the former's vital points. The Fire Master leaned to the side, dodging the sword light. He raised his halberd, and a whirlwind broke through the air. The halberd's might shook the heavens and the earth. The black-robed man's expression didn't change. He turned around, and his body moved with the halberd. The Fire Master focused, and the true origin energy around his body rippled. He used his cultivation to suppress the speed of the person in front of him. In the first exchange between the sword and halberd, Ning Chen immediately retreated. His sword's momentum was much faster, and he used his extreme speed to forcefully block the former's moves. In the blink of an eye, the battle of speed and strength had already gone through several exchanges. The Fire Master was shocked and even more impressed. The person in front of him was only a half-venerable, and yet he could exchange so many moves with him. It was truly unexpected. Extraordinary swordsman, I admire you. After a long exchange, the situation reached a stalemate. The Fire Master stopped his halberd and reached out to grab the tip of the sword. With a clang, Taisher was restrained and couldn't move at all. A cold glint flashed through Ning Chen's eyes. He flipped his palm and shook Yin out of the battle. Then he clenched his left hand, and a white rainbow appeared. The sword, which was as thin as a cicada's wing, was forced out again. It was awe-inspiring, and a cold light flashed in all directions. The Fire Master flipped his palm and blocked the sword again. However, the sword twisted, bypassing the former's palm, and continued forward. Back off! The Fire Master's face was filled with anger. His true origin surged and gathered the power of the earth fire in a radius of several hundred miles. Suddenly, an abnormally strong fire origin energy exploded, shaking the battle. Not far away, Qi Huan, who was blocking the guards, waved his hand to dissolve the aftershock. 9 green frost jades flew out and blocked the spreading fire origin energy. Qi Huan rushed to the former's side and asked, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Ning Chen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Light flashed through his deep eyes. It was too difficult for him to fight against a corporeal realm expert with his current strength. "You've done very well. Unfortunately, you've chosen the wrong master. You can talk about your friendship in the underworld." As the Fire Master spoke, he opened and closed his hands. Amidst the raging waves, the entire palace shook. Rays of red light flowed into the king's hall, increasing its power. "Be careful." Qi Huan's expression turned serious when he saw this. "Okay." Ning Chen nodded. His figure flashed, and he appeared in front of Yin, pulling her behind him. Just as the power was about to fall, the void in the hall swirled. A white-robed figure walked out. His old face was filled with the vicissitudes of time. "Fire Master, I haven't seen you for many years. Your temper is still so bad. It's just a few fire essences. Why do you have to make things difficult for 2 juniors?" Mo Master walked out and raised his hand, calming the wind and clouds. At the same time, in Golden Dawn City, in the Xiaoya Chang and restaurant, the owner of the Xiaoya Tower put down the scissors after trimming the last pot of flowers and walked downstairs. "Tower Master." Seeing the person who came, the shopkeeper bowed respectfully. "Okay." Mo Xiaowai nodded and calmly said, "I've been away for a few days. Before I return, the Xiaoya Chang and restaurant will be temporarily closed." Hearing this, the shopkeeper trembled and said, "Tower Master, how can we close such a big restaurant just like that? There are still guests staying in the guest rooms. Is this something I should consider?" Mo Xiaowai said indifferently. Soon after, he looked at the high platform and said, "Hong Yuan, let's go." On the high platform, Hong Yuan stopped playing the zither. She stood up and bowed before walking down the high platform. Chapter 633. In the Fire Nation's Imperial Palace, Missouri Zhu appeared and pointed at the sky. Seeing the former, Mo Zhu's face turned cold. "You really came? It's been a long time. I have to come and see an old friend," Mo Zhu said slowly. "Do we have such a relationship?" Mo Zhu shouted and clenched his hand. His halberd absorbed the power of the 8 desolates. Vigorous fire elemental energy roared crazily with shocking power. Mo Zhu raised his right hand and 7-colored brilliance gathered, illuminating the void. With a bang, the 2 experts clashed for the first time. Boundless turbulence violently shook the entire palace. Strange light shone brightly as the aftermath of the battle scattered between heaven and earth. 7 rainbow burial sun. The immortal technique appeared again, and the divine sun appeared. Its shocking power drowned the Fire Nation's master in front of it. "Ha!" Mo Zhu shouted angrily. Turbulence spun rapidly in all directions, and a huge vortex revolved around him. Then he slashed down with his halberd to meet the immortal technique head-on. The two techniques collided, and the earth trembled. The aftermath of the battle between the two experts in the immortal realm was endless, constantly shaking the imperial palace. Not far away, Ningchen was quietly watching the battle while protecting Yin. He wanted to experience the power of the second stage of the immortal realm. He had a great enemy who was not weaker than a corporeal expert. Moreover, he could appear at any time. Therefore, he had to understand the battle methods of experts at this level. This person was Xian Luo, a true demon among demons. Xian Luo's strength after breaking the seal should be slightly weaker than Emoju. However, the seal in the demonic wheel ocean palace for many years had greatly damaged Xian Luo's vitality. Coupled with the loss of half of his body, he was no longer at his peak. Based on this, it was very likely that Xian Luo at his peak was at the peak of the corporeal realm, or even comparable to a true realm expert. Big trouble. Ning Chen's eyes flashed. He hoped that Xian Luo's injuries would take more time to recover. In addition, after dealing with the matter of the phoenix body, he had to quickly start cultivating the celestial devil clan's ability that he obtained from Xian Luo. Otherwise, his chances of winning the next time they met would still be slim. Xian Luo could find him through the power senses. This was his greatest disadvantage. It meant that no matter where he went, Xian Luo could find him. While he was lost in thought, the battle between the two powerhouses in the Great Hall became increasingly intense. Although Mo Zhu came here in his incarnation, his combat strength was still terrifying. Every move he made could shake the wind and clouds. On the other hand, the Fire Master was supported by the power of Yen City's earth veins. He stood in the corporeal realm and had an endless supply of energy. He was actually on par with the Ink Master and was not at a disadvantage. With a loud bang, Mo Zhu lifted his hand to meet the halberd head-on. In the aftermath, boundless fist strength smashed into his body. For the first time, Mo Zhu's lips turned red. "Have you calmed down?" Mo Zhu said calmly as he flipped his palm, shaking off the battle. "Not yet." The Fire Master shouted coldly. The flame halberd danced with the fire elemental energy, and the fire dragon of the 8 wastelands appeared. Its roar shook the heavens as it rushed towards the former. Immortal technique, waning waxing moons. Mo Zhu raised his hand, and the power of extreme yin and extreme yang spread out. A yin moon appeared, and as the black and white intertwined, a world-shaking might that surpassed the natural order appeared again. Rumbling sounds rang out as the 8 desolation flame dragon collided with the yin moon immortal technique. A terrifying explosion rang out, and the formation flickered. Outside King City, 10,000 li of sand flew into the 9 heavens. Tick-tock, a light sound rang out. In the battle, blood trickled down from the corners of the Fire Lord's mouth. He was injured for the first time. "Fire Lord, you're in a sorry state." At this moment, outside the main hall, a purple-robed figure suddenly appeared. The Sword Dominator had reappeared in the world. Purple Marquis. Qi Huan squinted his eyes and looked at the man who appeared in the battle with a serious expression. "Old 8. Mo Zhu said, "Yes." As soon as he finished speaking, silver light gathered, and a silver-robed and silver-haired figure walked out, blocking in front of Purple Marquis. Ling Luozhen. Seeing the woman blocking in front of him, Purple Marquis's eyes flashed with a strange light. "You can't enter this hall." Ling Luozhen blocked in front of the king's hall and separated the battle. "Then let's see if you have the ability to stop me." As soon as he finished speaking, a sword light flashed, and the domineering sword cut through the void, pressing forward. Ling Luozhen flipped her palm to block the sword, and the ground around her trembled violently. "Your reaction is not bad, but it's still too weak." Purple Marquis condensed his yuan energy into his sword. His sword was swift and sharp, and its sharpness was unstoppable. It destroyed everything before his eyes. Ling Luozhen's body moved, and her yin energy converged, causing undercurrents to surge and collide with the sword light. The battle on the other side instantly became white-hot. Sword and palm collided, and killing intent filled the air. Inside and outside the king's hall, there were 2 battles. 4 ascending immortals attacked, and their might was shocking. Loud explosions resounded over 100 miles. On the other side, Chi Huan blocked the reinforcements of the 13 guards. The 9 azure frost pearls suppressed everyone. In the main hall, Ning Chen became the only person who didn't attack. He was seriously watching the battle. Mo Gate had come prepared, and the situation was clearly leaning towards Mo Gate. The decisive advantage of their strength made this battle disadvantageous for the Fire Nation from the start. Ninth brother, the Flame Realm is 300 miles to the east of this city. I'll tell you how to enter in a bit. Right now, you should immediately go there and retrieve the Flame Essence. Mo Sovereign sent the Flame Nation's ruler flying with a flip of his palm. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. Holding Yin's hand, he turned into a streak of light and shot towards the east. Seeing someone leave, the Fire Nation's expression immediately sank. He wanted to stop them with his halberd. However, Mo Zhu also moved. 7 colored streaks of light crisscrossed, blocking the path ahead. 700 miles to the east of Yen City, there was an endless mountain range. A black-clothed figure appeared and quickly rushed towards it. Ning Chen quickly found the location of the fire region. He clenched his left hand, and a white streak of light appeared. His 2 swords spun, and an extreme sun rose, slashing towards the void in front of him. Heaven and earth violently shook, and the illusion collapsed. The scene in front of him changed, and an unfamiliar world appeared before him. Large cracks appeared in the world where flames soared. Earth fire spewed out, reaching dozens of feet high. It was a shocking sight. Formation patterns flickered around the earth fire, concealing its aura. From the outside, there was only a mountain range that stretched for 1,000 miles. Ning Chen stepped in and immediately felt the surrounding temperature rise. The powerful pressure was even stronger than when he was in the Feng Shui Forbidden Land. 100 miles away, in a huge mountain pass, the waves of fire had reached their peak. The extremely high temperature caused the world to distort, and no one dared to take half a step closer. Ning Chen held Yin's hand and jumped into the mountain. His phoenix essence rose, blocking the surging waves of fire. It's so hot here. Wu wiped the sweat from her brow and said softly. Ning Chen's aura weakened, and he used all his strength to protect the little girl. He said softly, "Bear with it. We'll be out soon." Lava spewed out from the ground in front of him. A huge stone platform stood in the lava. There were about 20 to 30 red crystals floating up and down. The majestic fire essence overflowed, and it was exceptionally beautiful. Ning Chen's figure flashed and landed on the stone platform. With a wave of his hand, he collected 10 fire essences. "Take all of them." Ember raised her head and suggested. "There's no need." Ning Chen shook his head. Master Mo knows the method to enter this place, so he should also know how many fire essences there are. Since he said he would take 10, then take 10. There's no need to lose a lot for a small gain and make him wary. "Oh," Inter softly replied. She reluctantly glanced at the remaining dozen fire essences. There were treasures here, but she couldn't take them. How annoying. "Let's go back. The matter of the phoenix body is more important. If there's a chance, we can come back and take it." Seeing the reluctance in the little girl's eyes, Ning Chen spoke softly and was about to leave. But at this moment, Ning Chen suddenly paused. He looked down at the earth fire, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Under the earth fire, their eyes were similar yet cold. It was like a mirror image reflected in the eyes of the 2 people looking at each other. "Vermilion bird." Ning Chen coldly spat out 2 words. Before he had even finished speaking, the earth fire surged and a red-robed figure flew out. A similar appearance, a similar aura. Since ancient times, these 2 gods of fire had been destined to be incompatible. But now they had met once more. "Phoenix, we meet again," the vermilion bird lightly said. Ning Chen waved his hand, and Genesis Supreme appeared once more. Looking at the person in front of him, he didn't conceal his killing intent. "It seems that we can only meet on the battlefield." The vermilion bird clenched her right hand. Amidst the flowing lights, red feathers gathered and formed a scarlet divine weapon. It was cold and red as it spun continuously. Just as the 2 of them were about to fight again, an old voice rang out, entering Ning Chen's ears. "Old Ninth, Come back immediately after you take the fire essences. Hearing Master Mo's urging, Ning Chen frowned. He waved his hand, put away his sword, and flew toward the exit. In an instant, the black-robed figure left the fire region and disappeared. Looking at the former's figure, the vermilion bird's sword scattered and its eyes narrowed. This generation's phoenix had lost too much of its inheritance and was unable to use its innate abilities. This was the best opportunity for it to devour its body and restore its ancestors' might. Within the Fire Nation's royal palace, the battle between the two sides was still ongoing. Master Mo was suppressing the Fire Nation's master. The might of his immortal arts was difficult to block, and each move brought unparalleled pressure to the Fire Nation's master. Outside the palace, Ling Luo was blocking Purple Marquis with her true strength. Her pressure had far surpassed that of an ordinary Void Realm expert and was infinitely close to the corporeal realm. With the support of her extreme Yin energy, the master of Mo clan's 8th peak displayed an astonishing ability, forcibly blocking the late corporeal realm Purple Marquis. Ning Chen had just returned and was about to enter the battle when he was stopped by an old voice. Old 9th, Old 5th, there's no need for the two of you to worry about this matter. You should leave, said Master Mo calmly. Hearing this, Qi Huan sighed in his heart. He withdrew from the battle and walked out of the hall. 9th junior brother, let's go, said Qi Huan. Ning Chen frowned, but he didn't ask any questions. He suppressed the fluctuations in his heart and followed. As soon as the two of them left, space stirred and two more figures appeared. Without saying a word, they entered the battle. Outside Yen City, Ning Chen turned around to look behind him as a serious look flashed across his eyes. Just now, Ling Luo's condition had been very strange. With her strength, she shouldn't have been able to block Purple Marquis. 9th junior brother, don't think too much and ask too many questions. Focus on your work, reminded Qi Huan. Ning Chen returned to his senses and nodded once more before leaving with Qi Huan. Once the two of them were far away, an incomparably vigorous energy erupted from Yen City's royal palace, causing the entire palace to collapse. 7-colored light illuminated the world, engulfing everything within. Chapter 634. The Red Luan Star was an ancient star that had been passed down for countless years. It was famous in the 3 ancient eras, and it had reached its peak. However, after the collapse of the Western celestial world, the Red Luan Star also gradually declined. In ancient times, it was rumored that the Queen Mother of the West, who was the ruler of the Western celestial world, came from the Red Luan Star. Although it had been a long time, and no one knew whether the rumors were true or false, the Red Luan Star was indeed powerful. On the Red Luan Star, there were nearly 100 dynasties and countless aristocratic families and sections. Among the ancient ruins, one could still vaguely see some of the past glory. Among the sects, there were many large cities that crisscrossed with formations. The king's domain was located in one of the cities. Looking from the outside, there was only a hazy sea of fog. The Red Luan King's domain had been the absolute ruler of the Red Luan Star since the 3 ancient eras. They looked down on all sects, and few sects dared to challenge them. This was a true colossus, and its inheritance was frighteningly long. No one knew how many terrifying things were hidden under this seemingly peaceful inheritance. Over the past few months, the news of Princess Red Luan's wedding spread everywhere, and it became the most eye-catching event in the entire Red Luan King's domain. Many Luan carriages flew across the sky to congratulate the king's domain. In the fog, the king's domain appeared. In the deepest part of the fairyland where birds sang and flowers bloomed, there were many ancient palaces. They were majestic and magnificent, even surpassing the imperial court of the mortal world. In the sky above the king's domain, the void rolled, and a sedan covered by a white curtain appeared. When the patrolling guards saw it, they all knelt down and saluted. "Greetings, princess. Rise." In the sedan, a pleasant voice sounded. There was a trace of charm in the elegance, which made people feel weak all over. Hearing this familiar voice, the guards lowered their heads even more. They were afraid that if they did not pay attention, they would lose their composure in front of this charming princess. "Where is the princess?" In the sedan, the woman asked. She is with the prince consort, a guard replied respectfully. Tell her to come to the Drizzle Pavilion to see me. After that, the sedan drove out and flew toward the palace in the west. In front of the flowing wind palace, Hong Yi stood quietly. Beside her, Princess Red Luan, who was wearing a long dress, accompanied her. Hong Yi was very quiet and didn't speak much. In her calm eyes, traces of confusion became clearer and clearer, causing Princess Hong Luan to be even more worried. Princess Consort is back. She wants you to go to Drizzle Pavilion to see her. At this moment, a guard ran over from afar and knelt down to salute. I know. You can leave first, Princess Hong Luan said calmly. Yes. The guard accepted the order and got up to leave. Princess Hong Luan glanced at the man beside her as she softly said, I'll be leaving first. Hong Yi nodded and calmly agreed. Princess Hong Luan left. Her beautiful face was filled with worry as she walked towards the princess consort's palace. The Drizzle Pavilion was surrounded by mist and mist. In front of the pavilion was a dark blue lake that rippled under the water. The scenery was exceptionally beautiful. In front of the lake, a woman with a white veil over her face stood quietly. Her aura was restrained and powerful. The closer one got to her, the more one could feel the nobility that could not be blasphemed. Mistress. Princess Hong Luan walked over and respectfully bowed. The woman turned around and looked at the person in front of her. She calmly said, Hong Luan, how are things going? Princess Hong Luan lightly shook her head and said, Recently, his gaze has become more and more strange. When he looks at me, the emotions in his eyes are also fading. The mind-bewitching technique is likely to lose its effect. Hearing this, the woman frowned and said, Hong Luan's mind-bewitching technique has never been an exception. How can this be? I also don't know. There was nothing abnormal before, but after returning from the Western immortal world, this situation has become more and more serious, Princess Hong Luan replied. The woman narrowed her eyes and said, Did you meet someone in the Western immortal world? Or did you coincidentally meet an old friend of his and stimulate him to remember something? Princess Hong Luan thought for a moment and shook her head. Probably not. In the Western immortal world, other than Gui Nu and a few disciples of Ma's sect, he didn't have any contact with anyone else. The woman frowned again and said, Go and call him over. I'll help you test him. If he really remembers something, we can only use the mind-bewitching technique again. Princess Hong Luan heard this and a trace of hesitation flashed across her beautiful face. She softly said, Using the mind-bewitching technique on the same person twice will greatly affect his mind. I don't want to hurt him. The woman's eyes turned cold and said, Hong Luan, I asked you to use the mind-bewitching technique on him to make him fall in love with you, not to trap you. I don't want to hear what you said a second time. Hong Luan knows her mistake. Princess Hong Luan lowered her head and replied, Go. The woman's expression eased and said. Princess Hong Luan sighed in her heart and turned to leave. Less than an hour later, outside the Drizzle Pavilion, a red-clothed figure strode over. Her expression was as calm as water without any ripples. Greetings, Princess. Hong Yi bowed and greeted. Yaoji turned to look at the man in front of her and said calmly, I heard Hong Luan say that you remembered some things in the past. Is that true? Hong Yi shook her head and said, Princess is overthinking. Yaoji's eyes quietly observed her expression. After a long time, she warned, Your wedding with Hong Luan is approaching. I don't care whether you remembered anything or not. Your marriage with Hong Luan is already known to the world. At this time, I don't want to hear anything that I don't want to hear. Do you understand? Hong Yi nodded and softly responded. Go back. Yaoji waved her hand and said, I'll take my leave. Hong Yi bowed again and turned to leave. By Yujing. Seeing her turn to leave, Yaoji suddenly spoke. Hong Yi stopped and turned her head. She saw a gorgeous face appear in front of her. It was so familiar that her body unconsciously stiffened. In front of the lake, Yaoji's eyes were flowing with brilliance. The white veil on her face covered her appearance, and traces of a charming aura were emitted, bewitching people. A moment later, Hong Yi's expression returned to normal. The familiar face was once again hidden in her heart. Princess, is there anything else? Hong Yi asked indifferently. There's nothing else. You can leave. Yao Ji calmly said. Hong Yi nodded and turned to leave. After the phoenix figure left, Princess Hong Luan appeared and stepped forward. He has indeed begun to remember something, but it's very little. Maybe it's just some fragments of memory. Yao Ji slowly said. Hearing this, Princess Hong Luan heaved a sigh of relief. However, at this point, Yao Ji's tone changed. She looked at the woman in front of her and said, There's already someone in his heart. Although it's hidden very deeply, it's unforgettable. I can feel that he still hasn't truly forgotten that person. In addition, he may have suspected that his memory loss is related to the king's domain. Just now, at the last moment, he was clearly very vigilant against me. What do you mean? Princess Hong Luan asked softly. Find a chance to use the mind-bewitching technique on him as soon as possible. Be careful. Now he's very vigilant. It's not easy to succeed, Yao Ji said seriously. Princess Hong Luan nodded and silently agreed. Outside Hong Luan's star, in the endless starry sky, 3 figures walked over. The people from Mahist's sect had arrived at Hong Luan. They were extremely fast and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After landing on the vast star, they directly walked toward the king's domain. Mahist's sect's Gemini appeared in various large cities and walked toward the king's domain. The red invitation card flew out and disappeared into the fog. Before long, the fog dispersed and a great path appeared to welcome the guests. When the 3 of them entered the king's domain, the scenery around them immediately changed. It was a fairyland filled with singing birds and fragrant flowers. Spiritual qi was extremely abundant, making them feel as if their bodies had become lighter. So beautiful! Ro looked left and right, her large eyes filled with admiration. In front of them, Qi Huan turned his head and looked at the little girl beside Ning Chen. He gently smiled. This child had always been taken care of by his junior brother. Her childlike innocence had never disappeared. It was a good thing. On the path of martial arts, it was very important to be able to keep one's original heart. Unfortunately, there were very few people who could truly do it. Not long after the 3 of them entered the king's domain, a beautiful maidservant came over and led the 3 of them to the west. After walking for the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the maid stopped in a tidy little courtyard. She whispered a few words, then respectfully bowed and walked away. Miss, please wait. Ning Chen called out to her. The maid stopped and looked at the guest in front of her. Puzzled, she asked, Young master, do you have any other instructions? I want to see the prince consort of your domain. Can I trouble you to inform him? Ning Chen asked softly. The maid revealed a troubled expression. Young master, I'm sorry. The prince consort's matters have always been handled by the princess herself. Servants like us can't get close. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed when he heard this. He nodded and said, I was rash. The maidservant bowed again and retreated. 9th junior brother, are you very familiar with the prince consort of the Red Luan King's domain? Qi Huan asked. Ning Chen said softly, It's a very familiar old friend. It's just that we haven't met in a long time. He might not recognize me now. I see. Qi Huan smiled and said, You'll definitely have a chance to meet in a few days. There's no need to rush now. Ning Chen nodded and said, Senior brother, don't worry. I won't act rashly. On the side, his mouth twitched when she heard Ning Chen's words. These words could only fool an honest person like Qi Huan. It's already late. You've traveled for so long. Junior brother, you should rest first. Tomorrow, we'll go visit the Red Luan King together. Qi Huan looked at the darkening sky and said softly. Ning Chen nodded and led the little girl to the other side of the courtyard. Ning Chen walked into the guest room and prepared the bed for the little girl. He then prepared to leave. Be careful when you go, reminded him. Don't worry. Ning Chen softly replied and said, Don't run around here. I'll be back soon. Under the night sky, the black-clothed man left the courtyard in a flash. Before anyone could see him clearly, he had already disappeared. Flowing Wind Hall. In front of the hall, Hong Yi stood under the moon and looked into the distance. For some reason, she felt uneasy. At this moment, red mist filled the air and a beautiful figure walked out of thin air. Her eyes were as bright as the stars, and her decadent aura submerged Hong Yi. In an instant, the black-clothed man appeared and a cold sword slashed towards the woman behind Hong Yi. Chapter 635. In front of the flowing wind palace, the red lawn bewitched the heart. In an instant, the wind rose, and the demonic body appeared at the same time. The sword light threatened to kill. The palm and the sword collided, and the aftermath spread out in all directions. The red fog was scattered by the sword wind, and the decadent aura dissipated between heaven and earth. The wind and clouds on the Taisher sword changed, and a murderous aura circulated. With a slash of the sword, a furious gust of wind howled, and the sword broke through the dust. Princess Hong Luan flipped her palm to block the sword. Clanging sounds rang out as their quick moves collided. In the blink of an eye, over 10 moves had already been exchanged. Wisps of red mist filled the air and interweaved into an inescapable net. However, the black-robed figure was like a startled swan. Before the first sword was finished, another sword was raised. The sword was as fast as lightning, cutting through all the bindings. In the center of the battlefield, Red Robe stood there quietly. There was no change in her eyes. A moment later, with a wave of her hand, Mo Kuang appeared. With a clanging sound, the two swords clashed. Sword chi spread out in all directions. Their eyes were equally cold and emotionless. The two of them exchanged blows again. After a single glance, there was no turning back. The sword's edge was reincarnated, and killing intent filled the sky. In the blink of an eye, the battle turned into a blazing white. Mo Kuang's and Taisher's swords clashed, and the two divine weapons crisscrossed. Phoenix primordial surged, and magnificent neon lights bloomed in the night sky. Queen Hong Luan withdrew herself from the battle. She looked at the two of them as her eyes flickered. In the battle, these two were at the pinnacle of swordsmanship. They were the closest to being the only pair in the world. Their swords came from the same source, but their sword moves were completely different. Battle of the Phoenix Demon under the moon, battle rebirth battle, sword moving spring and autumn. Who are you? How dare you trespass into the king's domain? The phoenix body waved her sword and shook off the battle as she spoke. The one who taught you a lesson. The demonic body's eyes were as deep as the abyss. Extreme yang rose and a sword reflected the sun and moon. The martial arts of the Sun Sutra reappeared in the world. Seeing this, the phoenix body's expression turned serious. She put her left hand together and turned it into a sword. Suddenly, a scorching torrent spread out. The power of the heavenly book of Yang soared into the sky. The Sun Sutra and the Book of Sun, two extreme Yang martial arts, appeared at the same time. In an instant, the night was as bright as day, and boundless heat waves swept out in all directions. His sword intent condensed and he struck out with his sword. The two swords collided with a shocking explosion. Angry waves shook, affecting the entire king's domain's grand formation. Heaven and earth shook, and dust and sand tumbled like waves. Seeing that the battle had reached a stalemate, Princess Hong Luan took a step forward and stretched out her delicate hand. Red mist filled the air as she tried to capture Hei. Skybreaker! The demon body swung his sword to block Mo Kuang's attack. Immediately, his left hand condensed Yuan Qi and slashed his sword across the air. The sword Qi swept over. Princess Hong Luan raised her vital essence and forcefully dispersed the sword will. Her figure did not stop as she swept forward. The demon body's eyes turned cold. It clenched its left hand and a white beam of light appeared. A mournful sword cry echoed through the world as it wrapped around the demon body's arm. Two swords appeared at the same time, one hard and one soft. The demonic body was fighting one against two, displaying his shocking swordsmanship for the first time. Mo Gate's ninth son, Wang Jing, used force. Your crimes are unforgivable. Princess Hong Luan flipped her palm to shake off the sword tip on her arm. She struck out with her palm, causing red mist to surge, breaking through the clouds. The demon body took a step forward, moving like the wind. His sword was brilliant, and he made a strong counterattack. Princess Hong Luan changed the direction of her palm again. The red mist turned into a waterfall and locked onto the sword tip. The red mist twined, and the white rainbow soft sword's edge twisted, breaking free from its bindings. The soft sword cut through the red mist, pressing forward. White rainbow chill strike, Mo Kwang blocked the attack. In front of the princess, the phoenix body flashed past as the tip of his sword slashed down, unleashing 1,000 feet of phoenix flames. Unrepentant. The demon body snorted coldly. The white rainbow wrapped around Mo Kwang's sword, and Taisher slashed towards the phoenix body. Princess Hong Wan stepped forward and received the sword tip with a flip of her palm. Red mist spread, and she made another counterattack. In an instant, the demon body moved, dodging the palm force with extreme speed. The sword tip turned back, and a dazzling killing light shot out, sealing the throat and seizing the soul. Princess Hong Wan leaned to the side, avoiding the sword tip. The sword tip twisted again, following her like a shadow. The extremely fast sword had endless variations. One sword after another, forcing the demon body to kill. The sword tip collided, and the phoenix body retreated half a step. She stepped forward, and her figure was like an illusion. At the same extreme speed, she pressed forward. Clanging sounds of swords rang out, and sparks flew in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it was a confrontation of absolute speed. On the other side, Princess Hong Wan's palm force grew stronger, supporting the phoenix body and sealing the black robe. There was blood, and the two swords were red. However, the demon body's expression did not change. The sword force changed again, and the white rainbow soft sword moved strangely, borrowing and diverting force. The exquisite defense blocked the stepping celestial. The wind and clouds in front of the flowing wind palace changed. The sound of swords was ear-piercing, and the sword light was dazzling. The demon body's combat power was shocking. In a shocking battle, the demon body on the sword went against the celestial. With two swords in hand, both hardness and softness were combined. The white rainbow on the left turned into heavenly might, and the Taisher on the right fought with extreme speed. One was strange and one was fast, showing the extreme power of martial arts. The rising sun shines in the east. Seeing that the situation was in a stalemate, the red robe's sword changed the wind and clouds, and a divine sun rose behind him. Wherever the divine sun's brilliance shone, the sword will surged endlessly. Today, you are a disgrace to the name of knowing destiny. The demon body's eyes were unusually cold. His left palm slashed across the sword tip, and blood dripped, dyeing Taisher's sword tip red. In an instant, the crimson sword light rose to the extreme, and unparalleled sword pressure swept across the entire Red Luan realm. At this moment, in the king's domain, cultivators from all over raised their heads and looked into the depths of the king's domain. They were shocked. This was Sword Qi. In a small courtyard in the west of the king's domain, Qi Huan, who was about to rest, felt the rapidly spreading Sword Qi in the distance. His expression changed, and he took a step forward, rushing in the direction of the Sword Qi. Nirvana! In front of the flowing wind palace, the sword of Nirvana reappeared. The magnificent sword light rose between heaven and earth, and the extreme sword pressure shook the sky. In an instant, the sword light fell, breaking through the sky, and an earth-shattering vibration drowned the void for hundreds of feet. Under the sword light, the phoenix body and Queen Hong Luan joined forces to block it. With a bang, they were forced back several steps, and their blood and qi surged violently. At the same time, in the king's domain, the matrices were automatically activated, and the matrices flickered, resisting the terrifying aftershocks. How dare you! In the depths of the king's domain, an angry roar came out. The void rolled, and thunder roared and lightning flashed. A large hand slapped down, capturing the black robe below. The demon body stepped forward, and his body moved quickly, avoiding the large hand. Then he slashed with his sword, and sword light soared in all directions. In the void, the large hand that gathered wind and clouds collapsed, scattering between heaven and earth. Ninth son of Ogate, you dare to cause trouble in my king's domain? I can't let you live. Before he finished speaking, purple light gathered, and a man in purple clothes walked out. His eyes were filled with disdain, and the aura of a king was undoubtedly revealed. Seeing the person who came, the demon body's expression froze. The Red Luan realm monarch was in trouble. With the appearance of a monarch, his aura was incomparably vigorous, and the pressure made the whole battlefield shake. He had the strength of a peak immortal corporeal realm, and he seemed even stronger than Master Emo. In the next moment, the Red Luan realm monarch moved, and an extremely powerful palm sealed the void, swallowing heaven and earth. With the arrival of danger, the demon body's eyes flashed with a bloody light. The true essence in his body surged, and the yellow spring seal was activated. At this moment, a green light flashed in the distance, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived at the battlefield. With a flip of its palm, it shook the monarch. With a muffled groan, Chi Huan retreated several steps. He was heavily injured in just one move. Seeing this, the demon body suppressed the demonic chi that was about to erupt. His figure flashed, and he took Chi Huan, retreating 10 feet away. "How are you?" Ning Chen asked. "I'm fine." Chi Huan endured his injuries and replied. Then he looked at the person in front of him and said, "Realm Monarch, my 9th junior brother didn't mean to offend your realm. There must be some misunderstanding between us. I hope you can be merciful." "Whether it's a misunderstanding or not, we'll know once I capture this person." The Red Luan realm monarch didn't hide the coldness in his eyes at all. He took a step forward and pressed forward once more. Ning Chen frowned slightly, and he took Chi Huan with him, turning around and dodging the attack. The Red Luan realm monarch was about to attack again, but his expression suddenly changed. Ding! But at this moment, the sound of a string resounded between heaven and earth, stirring up the wind and directly separating the battlefield. Amidst the sound, a man in luxurious clothes walked out with a silver string in his hand. Blood dripped from the string, dyeing the ground below red. "Guest, long time no see," said Emo Shaowai as he glanced at the black-clothed youth not far away. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. "Thank you for your help, Housemaster." "It's nothing," said Emo Shaowai calmly. The Red Luan realm monarch's expression sank. "Housemaster Xiao Yu, this isn't a place you should be. Realm monarch, keeping people 1,000 miles away from you is beneath your dignity," said Emo Shaowai indifferently. "The Red Luan realm doesn't welcome scheming people." "Housemaster Xiao Yu, please leave," said the realm monarch coldly. "Ah." Emo Shaowai lightly smiled. "In terms of scheming, I'm far from being your opponent." Also, Emo Shaowai's expression turned cold. "You don't have the right to stop me from going where I want to go." "Arrogant." The realm monarch's expression sank. True essence surged in his hand, and a heavy pressure rapidly increased. "Do you want to fight? I'll accompany you anytime." Emo Shaowai indifferently looked at the surging true essence around the former's body. "Realm monarch, you're a guest. Hong Luan's wedding is imminent, so let's talk about our grudges later." Just as the battle was about to begin, an elegant voice rang out from afar, stopping the two from fighting. Recognizing where the voice came from, the realm monarch suppressed his anger. He coldly glanced at the 3 people in front of him, then took a step forward and returned to the palace. Emo Shaowai also restrained his aura and looked to the west with a smile. "Princess Consort Yaoji, we haven't seen each other for many years. Aren't you going to meet your old friends?" "It's not appropriate for a woman to meet guests." "Housemaster Xiao Yu, welcome to the Red Luan realm," said Yaoji from the west. "You're welcome." Emo Shaowai smiled. To be able to meet so many old friends today, this trip was worth it. "Princess Consort, please send my regards to the old ancestor." "Of course," said Yaoji. After greeting her, Emo Shaowai looked at the demon and said, "Friend, do you have time to talk?" "Any time." Ning Chen calmly nodded. "Very good. Once I've settled Hong Luan, I'll treat you to a drink." After speaking, Emo Shaowai didn't stay any longer and turned to leave. After taking 3 steps, Emo Shaowai suddenly stopped and looked at the red-clothed man not far away. He said, "I haven't thought of how to make you pay for the wound on Hong Luan's face. Perhaps you can think of a price to satisfy me." After speaking, Emo Shaowai faintly smiled and walked away. After the realm monarch and house master Xiao Yu left, Ning-Chun coldly glanced at the phoenix and didn't continue fighting. He quickly left with the heavily injured Chi Huan. "Do you know him?" asked Princess Consort Yaoji softly. The red-clothed man shook his head and didn't say a word. He turned around and walked toward the palace behind him. Chapter 636. In a quiet courtyard in the west of the king's domain, two people appeared. Ning-Chun condensed phoenix essence in his palm and sent it into the person beside him to help him heal. Not long after, Chi Huan's injuries were suppressed. He opened his eyes and looked at his junior brother. "Ninth junior brother, you were too reckless today." "I had no choice." Ning-Chun sighed. "I'll go back to my room to heal. You should rest too. Remember, don't be so impulsive again." Chi Huan reminded him. Ning-Chun nodded. Chi Huan dragged his injured body back to his room. Ning-Chun pondered for a moment before walking to the guest room on the other side. In the brightly lit room, sat on a stool and kicked her legs as she waited quietly. When she heard Ning-Chun's footsteps, she immediately ran over to open the door. "Did you fight?" Looked at the person in front of her and asked. Ning-Chun nodded and walked into the room. "Why did you fight? Can't you be reasonable when you're talking to yourself?" Closed the door and quickly followed behind. Princess Hong Luan seemed to want to do something to the phoenix body. The phoenix body didn't notice, so I had no choice but to attack. "So we fought," Ning-Chun said softly. "Didn't you say that the phoenix body is intelligent? Why is it so stupid?" Pouted and poured a cup of tea for him. "I'm not sure. Maybe something happened that I couldn't resist." Ning-Chun took the tea and said softly. "Then what about his marriage with Princess Hong Luan? We can't beat those old monsters here." Moved a stool to the side and sat down. "If we can't beat them, then we have to think of a way." Ning-Chun took a sip of tea and replied. "What way?" Also poured herself a cup of tea and asked curiously. "I haven't thought of one yet." Ning-Chun said calmly. Spat out a mouthful of tea and sprayed it all over his face. She immediately jumped up from the stool and used her sleeve to wipe it clean. It's okay, Ning-Chun said softly. He pushed the little girl's hand away and didn't mind. Guiltily sat back down on the stool and said awkwardly, "What if the phoenix body doesn't wake up? Should I stop it? You can't expose yourself." She didn't care whether Ning-Chun was a demon or a human, but the others certainly didn't think the same. The sects of the Central State couldn't tolerate the existence of demons, and the people of the outer heavens were certainly the same. "Yes." Ning-Chun nodded and said, "If the phoenix body is still stubborn on the day of the wedding, we can only forcefully stop it. Even if our identity is exposed, we can't sit back and do nothing." Is there really no other way? When she was in the Western Celestial world, she had seen how powerful the realm king of the Red Luan realm was. At that time, it was only a clone. Now that they were in the Red Luan realm, once their identities were exposed, it would not be easy for them to escape unscathed. Moreover, Lord Emo would be arriving soon. At that time, it was hard to say if he would stand on their side. Ning-Chun looked outside the window and pondered for a moment before saying, "We can't be completely out of options. Let's take it one step at a time. The appearance of the Dawn Moon Tower Master today might be a turning point." "That black-hearted boss?" asked in surprise. Ning-Chun nodded. "He's just a big profiteer. No matter how strong he is, how strong can he be?" Curled her lips. "You can't judge a book by its cover." Ning-Chun looked at the little girl in front of him and softly said, "The strength of the Dawn Moon Tower Master is at least on the same level as the Realm King of the Red Luan Realm and Lord Emo. It's just that she usually doesn't reveal her strength." "That strong?" asked in surprise. Ning-Chun nodded and said, "If I didn't guess wrongly, Hong Luan must have been a member of the Red Luan Realm in the past. Since the Dawn Moon Tower Master was able to save her here, her strength is definitely not below the Realm King of the Red Luan Realm." Guiltily drank a mouthful of tea and said, "If I had known earlier, I would have treated him better at the Dawn Moon Tower and not called him a profiteer." Ning-Chun put down the cup of tea and stood up to walk to the window, saying, "Children's words carry no harm. You are still a child, so the Dawn Moon Tower Master won't bicker with you. Moreover, you will be able to see him again very soon. See him? Why do I want to see him? Moved a high stool to the window and sat beside it as she asked. To talk about business, Ningchen replied. What about Sister Hong Luan? Continued asking. She's here too. Ningchen looked at the magnificent scenery of the king's domain outside the window and said, the slash on Hong Luan's face by the phoenix body won't end well. The matters involved in the phoenix body's slash are definitely far from what we have seen. The Dawn Moon Tower Master definitely didn't appear in the Red Luan realm at this time to congratulate us. Will he help us? Asked expectantly. Ningchen shook his head and said, he won't. The Dawn Moon Tower Master is a merchant, and merchants pursue profit. Unless we have something of value that can catch his eye, it won't be an easy task to get his help. Previously, when he helped Hong Luan, it was a fair transaction, and no one owes anyone a favor. Today, the Dawn Moon Tower Master helped us, which is already commendable. However, this favor will end here, and there won't be any more. A black-hearted merchant. Pouted. He isn't black-hearted, but he knows better. The human heart is complicated, and judging by value may seem heartless, but sometimes it's the most correct method. After speaking, Ning Chen's gaze shifted to the little girl beside him and said, a favor is heavy. Unless it's someone you cherish, don't owe too many favors and don't give too many favors. Don't think that you will be rewarded for helping others. There's a limit to everything, and too many favors will similarly distort a person's heart. The Dawn Moon Tower Master is the most intelligent person in the world and can see clearly. I don't understand, said delicately. If you don't understand, then remember it. You will naturally understand it in the future, Ningchen said softly. Oh, replied and leaned against the window, looking at the scenery outside. She said, then do we have anything that can catch the eye of this black-hearted merchant? Ningchen nodded and said, the Dawn Moon Tower Master's words before leaving today are an invitation to negotiate. The Dawn Moon Tower Master's wine isn't something you can drink as you wish. What you will do next will depend on the outcome of this negotiation. Don't lose out, said. Don't worry. Up until now, we haven't had any conflicts of interest with the Dawn Moon Tower Master. This negotiation is just for each side to take what they need. It will be much easier than the negotiation with the Heavenly Sanctum, Ningchen replied. Nodded, not quite understanding. She thought for a moment and said, if we can awaken the phoenix body this time, will we still go back? Ningchen fell silent. He didn't directly answer and softly said, it's impossible for the identity of this half of my body to remain a secret forever. Do you know why no one can tolerate a devil? Devils are bad people, but you aren't, replied delicately. Ningchen lightly shook his head and calmly said, you're wrong. It's because a devil's heart is cold. In essence, Xian Luo, Xia Zi, and I are all the same. A devil is a devil. There has never been a distinction between good and bad. Ning Chen's dark eyes became even more profound as he continued. A devil's nature is much simpler than a human's nature, but it's also much crueler. Just like when I massacred the Allied forces in the Central Province, I wasn't any different from how I am now. The reason why I've always wanted to summon the phoenix body back is because I want to quickly hand over external matters and focus on cultivating the divine abilities of the celestial devil clan so that I can deal with Xian Luo's pursuit. The other, more important reason is that my rationality is based on my past memories. However, I don't know how much longer I can endure it. Perhaps one day, I'll get tired of it and return to being like Xian Luo, treating human lives like dirt. Hearing Ning Chen's words, raised her head. Her eyes were filled with tears as she said in a wronged manner, do you not want me anymore? Ning Chen looked at the little girl and said, I promised that I would teach you martial arts. However, if you stay by my side, you won't know when you'll be in danger. Therefore, it would be more suitable for you to be given to the phoenix body. His brain is damaged now. How can he teach me martial arts? Hiner said as she wiped her tears. Ningchen raised his hand to wipe away the tears at the corner of her eyes and said, the choice is in your hands. Even if I give you to the phoenix body in the future, I'll have to wait until he recovers his memories. After all, we are one body. The only difference is that we walk different paths. Now that my original body is missing, following the phoenix body is the best choice. Devils have never been a race with patience. Even I don't know when I'll get tired of this fake side of me. If you don't want to endure it anymore, you can. I'm mentally prepared and won't be afraid. It's fine as long as you don't abandon me. That day at the Waning Moon restaurant, you promised that you wouldn't abandon me again, said as she wiped her tears. Hearing this, Ning Chun frowned slightly, not knowing how to answer. At the same time, in the big city next to the Red Luan Kingdom, Mo Xiaoai walked in front of a restaurant that was not inferior to the Waning Moon Chang. In the hall, Hong Wan, who had been waiting for him, saw him return. She stood up and bowed respectfully, "House Master." Mo Xiaoai nodded and said, "Hong Wan, prepare a pot of heartless night dream tomorrow. There will be a distinguished guest coming." "House Master, you met an acquaintance on this trip?" Hong Wan asked in surprise. "Oh, don't ask what you shouldn't ask. Just prepare the good wine." Mo Xiaoai chuckled and walked up to the second floor. On the second floor, the layout was exactly the same as the Waning Moonchang, an Injinsi city. There were the same 10 guest rooms, and a sign hung in front of each room. Mo Xiaoai entered the bright room and waved his hand to close the door. In the room, exotic flowers and herbs were arranged. Each of them was a rare treasure in the world. The fragrance was faintly discernible and intoxicating. On the other side of the room, a wooden box that was more than 10 feet long was placed on a quaint table. The wooden box was very ordinary and there was nothing special about it. "Friend, long time no see." Mo Xiaoai looked at him and smiled. But in the wooden box, a light sound was heard, as if it was responding to the former. "Can't wait? Oh, don't be impatient. Now, I have something that interests me more. Fighting and killing, how vulgar." Mo Xiaoai chuckled and said, "Have you seen a demon who has been trying to maintain his rationality? A demon who has lost his humanity and can still maintain his rationality by relying on his past memories. I really have a whole new level of respect for him. However, how long do you think he can endure this false mask?" Chapter 637. In the Red Luan royal territory, as the wedding day of Princess Hong Wan approached, the festive atmosphere in the territory became more and more intense. Lanterns and colored banners were hung high everywhere. Outside the territory, in a neighboring city, Ning Chun walked over with Yi. The gloomy and rainy weather was incompatible with the festive atmosphere in the entire Red Luan city. In a private room on the second floor of the Dawn Moon restaurant, the owner had prepared wine and was waiting for the guests. On the first floor, there was singing and dancing. The dancers on the stage were faintly discernible, causing the guests below to be unable to take their eyes off them. Not long after, Ning Chen and Tin entered. Hong Wan personally went up to welcome them and brought them to the second floor. "Sister Hong Wan, is the injury on your face healed?" Looked at Hong Wan and asked. "It's healed." Hong Wan removed the veil on her face and a delicate and beautiful face appeared in front of them. It was flawless and even prettier than Shizi. "Sister Hong Wan is really beautiful." Ina's large eyes were filled with envy. Hong Wan put on the veil and gently smiled. Is also very beautiful. When you grow up, you will definitely be prettier than sister." Hearing this, smiled happily and nodded heartlessly. As they spoke, the three of them entered the bright room. The owner of the Dawn Moon restaurant changed into a plain silver-gray robe. Her powerful aura was completely different from the first time they met. "Restaurant master, the guests are here." Hong Wan respectfully bowed. "And you can leave first. Also, bring our little girl In, to taste Hong Wan's specialty dishes." Mo Xiaoai smiled. "Yes." Hong Wan bowed again and accepted the order. Ning Chen also patted the little girl's head and indicated for her to leave with Hong Wan. In, obediently followed them out. When she was about to leave the room, she turned around and said, "Restaurant master, don't take my previous words to heart. You are not a black-hearted merchant." Mo Xiaoai chuckled and said, "Little girl In is right. I am a black-hearted merchant. Otherwise, Why would it be called, All Merchants Are Evil? Hong Wan covered her mouth and laughed before leaving with the little girl. All these years, only Ener dared to call the restaurant master a black-hearted merchant in front of her. Please have a seat. After the two of them left, Mo Xiaowai looked at the person in front of him and softly said, Many thanks. Ning Chen didn't stand on ceremony and sat down across from him. How is it? The layout of my restaurant is pretty good, right? Mo Xiaowai took out the heartless nightmarish dream he had prepared beforehand. He poured 2 cups and pushed 1 cup in front of the person in front of him. Brothel Master Xiaoya's taste is naturally not something an ordinary person can compare to. Ning Chen took the wine cup and replied, Where's the wine? Mo Xiaowai asked again. Heartless nightmarish dream. Naturally, it's also a top-quality wine. Ning Chen replied after smelling and tasting it. Brother Ning, do you know that I've always been stingy? It's hard for me to treat people to a drink. Mo Xiaowai chuckled. Businessmen pursue profit. The wine in a restaurant is meant to be sold, not used to invite people, Ning Chen said calmly. Oh, it's really easy to talk to smart people. With Brother Ning's wisdom, you should have more or less guessed why I invited you here, Mo Xiaowai continued. I can guess a little but not much, Ning Chen said softly. It took me a lot of effort to save Hong Wan. It reminded me of the grudge from 100 years ago. It's really not easy to let go of it. Mo Xiaowai took a sip of wine and smiled. Brothel Master is from the Red Luan King's territory? Ning Chen put down his cup and asked. That's right. When did you find out? Mo Xiaowai wasn't too surprised. Based on the Red Luan King's attitude towards you, you're definitely not welcomed by the Red Luan King's territory. However, you were able to enter the King's territory so smoothly. It only means that you're very familiar with the territory. Ning Chen paused and looked at Mo Xiaowai before continuing. Based on the conversation between you and Princess Yaoji yesterday, it's obvious that you've known each other for a long time. You mentioned ancestor in one sentence. I don't think outsiders would call you that. Mo Xiaowai chuckled and said, You were able to infer the general truth from these details that ordinary people wouldn't notice. Brother Ning's intelligence is really admirable. You're too kind. Ning Chen said calmly, Brothel Master, you're the one who's really surprised me. With your strength, I think you're rarely matched even in the entire Red Luan Star field. Mo Xiaowai smiled and filled the former's cup again. He said, The space zone is vast, and there are many planets with life. Who knows where the peerless experts who are beyond our knowledge are hiding? In the end, we are just frogs in a well. How much we see is how big the sky is. The real sky may be much bigger than what we see. Ning Chen was silent. After a while, he said softly, I've learned something. Mo Xiaowai filled his cup and continued, To be honest, Brother Ning, I used to be from the Red Luan King's territory. I've known the Red Luan King and Princess Yaoji for a long time. As for our relationship, the Red Luan King and Princess Yaoji are the current Red Luan and Princess Yaoji. Master and Shadow, Ning Chen narrowed his eyes and said calmly. Mo Xiaowai took a sip of wine. What an incredible young man. His intelligence was really terrifying. After a while, Mo Xiaowai put down his cup and said, Brother Ning's guess is correct. Since ancient times, there have been 2 successors in each generation of the Red Luan King's territory. One is the Master and the other is the Shadow. The Master stands in front of the people and the Shadow stands behind the people. If there's no accident, the Master will eventually devour the Shadow and become the Master of the Red Luan. Only when something happens to the Master will the Shadow have the chance to walk in front of the people and take on the responsibility of the successor. The Red Luan is this generation's Shadow. What a cruel rule. Ning Chen replied and asked, What about the Brothel Master? Is she the Master or the Shadow? What do you think, Brother Ning? Mo Xiaowai smiled. Master, Ning Chen replied without hesitation. Oh. Mo Xiaowai looked surprised and said, Why are you so sure, Brother Ning? Tolerance. Ning Chen said calmly, No matter how similar the Shadow is to the Master, it's still different. I think that in the countless years of the Red Luan King's territory's inheritance, there are only a handful of cases where the Shadow has successfully replaced the Master. The difference in the path of growth is beyond imagination. The tolerance of the master standing in front of the people and the shadow standing behind the people will only increase. Ningchen glanced at the two people on the first floor through the bead curtain and said, "It's not that I'm disrespectful to Miss Hong Luan, but regardless of personal grudges, the gap between Miss Hong Luan and the Red Luan Queen is not small. It's not only martial arts cultivation, but also many other factors. It can be said that Miss Hong Luan has no chance of winning against the Red Luan Queen." Mo Xiaowai tasted the wine in his cup and said calmly, "Hong Luan is indeed not suitable to be the master of the Red Luan King. Miss Hong Luan is not suitable, but the brothel master is different." Ningchen looked at the person in front of him and said, "The Red Luan Queen walked from the shadow to the front of the people. Even though she gradually gained the strength and dignity of a king, she is still lacking compared to the brothel master. I think that this gap will be difficult to make up for in this lifetime." Mo Xiaowai smiled and did not comment further. He changed the topic and said, "Let's not talk about this anymore. Oh right, there's one thing that I've always been interested in, but I don't know if I should ask." "Brothel master, feel free to ask," Ningchen replied. Mo Xiaowai raised his cup and toasted to Ningchen. "In my knowledge, devils are the symbol of slaughter. I've never seen a devil like Brother Ning who works hard to restrain his nature. May I ask why?" "The brothel master's understanding is not wrong. I'm not different from other devils. In places unknown to the brothel master, I may have killed more people than anyone else. However, I have something that must be done, so I have to follow the rules set by humans." Ningchen spoke with an indifferent expression as he downed the wine in his cup with a clink of wine. "You found a way to revive the dead?" Mo Shuai also drank the wine in his cup and asked slowly. "Yes," Ningchen replied. "I can't help you with this. Although I like to do business with like-minded people, I don't have this bargaining chip," Mo Xiaowai said with regret. "Don't worry. I've been searching for more than 20 years. Maybe I'll need another 20 years, 40 years, or even 100 years. Maybe one day you'll get this bargaining chip. At that time, no matter if I'm a human or a devil, you can exchange it for everything I have," Ningchen said unhurriedly. "Even if it's your life?" Mo Xiaowai raised his head and said indifferently, "Yes." Ningchen nodded. "This kind of business is really tempting. If such a day really comes, I don't want your life. I want your sword, the only sword in the world," Mo Xiaowai said with unprecedented seriousness. "If such a day comes, I'll give it to you with both hands," Ningchen said calmly. Hearing this, Mo Xiaowai smiled, and his expression returned to normal. He filled the wine glasses in front of the two again and said, "Back to the topic, I invited Brother Ning to come here to discuss another business." "Please tell me," Ningchen replied. "The enmity between me and the Red Luan King's territory is too long ago. There's no need to mention it again. However, that girl Hong Luan has worked hard for the Waning Moon restaurant all these years. Even if she didn't make any contributions, she still worked hard. I think she should get justice for being chased by the Red Luan King's territory back then." Mo Xiaowai smiled. "Why don't you do it yourself?" Ningchen asked. "Because I can't." Mo Xiaowai said honestly, "The waters of the Red Luan King's territory are much deeper than they look. If I do it, it'll be too troublesome if those old monsters are involved." "With your strength, do you still need to worry about this?" Ningchen frowned. "Two fists can't fight four hands. Although I'm not afraid of this kind of trouble, I don't want to easily provoke them," Mo Xiaowai said indifferently. "What can I get?" Ningchen raised his cup and asked. "A chance." Mo Xiaowai said softly, "When Brother Ning appeared in Jinxi City, you didn't know much about the Red Luan Star Field. It's impossible for you to have any enmity with Princess Hong Luan. The reason why you attacked last night should be because of the prince consort of the Red Luan King's territory. I can give you a chance to solve this fairly. Without the interference of the Red Luan King's territory, there will be fewer obstacles for Brother Ning." Hearing this, Ningchen fell silent and didn't say anything. Mo Xiaowai looked at him and continued, "You need a chance, and I also want to get justice for Hong Luan. I think this cooperation is also the purpose of Brother Ning's visit today. As for whether this slap will hurt enough, it depends on Brother Ning's strength. Chapter 638. In front of the Dawn Moon brothel, Hong Wan stood quietly as she sent off the honored guest. Her beautiful face was lightly covered by a thin veil, but it still couldn't hide her tranquil and gentle temperament. She used to be the princess's shadow, but now that she was lucky enough to leave the king's domain, Hong Wan cherished it very much. She was sincerely grateful to everyone who had helped her, including the house master and the young people who were far away. On the second floor, in the bright room, the Dawn Moon brothel mistress wiped the silver strings wrapped around her sleeves. Bit by bit, she was very careful. All the guests who visited the Dawn Moon house knew that Hong Luan was proficient in the zither. However, what they didn't know was that Hong Luan's zither skills were taught by the Dawn Moon house's owner. The Dawn Moon brothel mistress was not good at the zither, but she was good at strings. She had mastered all the strings in the world. To be able to suppress the current king of the Red Luan realm for several hundred years, the Dawn Moon Tower's master, as the main body, was the most shockingly talented successor to the throne of the Red Luan realm. However, due to some reasons, she gave up. Hong Luan. In front of the Dawn Moon house, Hong Luan heard the house master's voice and returned to her senses. She turned around and walked towards the second floor. In the king's domain, time passed day by day. There were less than 10 days left before the wedding of Princess Hong Luan. Most of the invited guests had already arrived. Only a few of the most distinguished magnates had yet to appear. Mo Zhu was one of them. However, everyone knew that these people should be arriving soon. Sure enough, when almost all the guests had arrived, a golden light shone in the sky above the king's domain, and an incomparable pressure spread out. It was noble and imposing, and people couldn't help but look sideways. The mist outside the king's domain dispersed, and golden flames filled the air. In the flames, 3 7-colored elks pulled a carriage through the air. The shocking scene shocked everyone in the king's domain. Empress Jinsi. Someone recognized the golden dawn symbol on the carriage and blurted out. Rumor had it that among the strongest cultivators in the Hong Luan galaxy, the emperor of the Jinsi Empire was the closest to the true realm. He had already taken half a step into the true realm 100 years ago, and his strength was unfathomable. Overlord Jinsi appeared. A red divine bridge appeared in the sky above the king's domain, leading directly to the depths of the king's domain. 3 7-colored elks pulled the carriage onto the divine bridge and rushed into the depths of the king's domain. From beginning to end, the owner of the carriage never showed up. As Overlord Jinsi disappeared at the end of the divine bridge, a woman suddenly appeared in front of the king's domain. Her face was calm and peaceful. She held a Taoist seal in her hands and chanted a spell. She closed her eyes and spoke to the heavenly language. Her fluttering fine black hair drifted in the wind. Wherever the woman passed, hundreds of flowers bloomed, and life descended upon the world. Spirit cultivator. The instant the young woman stepped into the Red Luan realm, everyone could sense her presence. Gazing into the distance, expressions of shock appeared on their faces once more. Please. With the arrival of the heaven speaker, the divine bridge reappeared. The voice of the Red Luan realm king was heard, and she personally went to the end of the divine bridge to welcome him. The arrival of the 2 strongest cultivators in the world attracted the attention of everyone. Just as everyone was unable to calm down for a long time, 7 colors shone brightly in the void. An aura that was not inferior to the previous 2 cultivators appeared and quickly spread out. In a small courtyard on the west side, Ning Chen and Qi Huan sensed something and walked out of their rooms. Looking at the swirling void in the distance, their eyes narrowed. It was Master Mo. He was finally here. Within the king's domain, within the 7-colored light, Lord Mo appeared. His white robe fluttered in the wind, as if an immortal had descended. His otherworldly aura caused others to involuntarily feel awe. In the next moment, Lord Mo stepped onto the divine bridge and disappeared at the end of the bridge. The appearance of the 3 strongest cultivators caused the wind and clouds to change. At this moment, the sound of strings rang out between heaven and earth. Drifting wind and drifting clouds drifted over thousands of miles to meet the king. Within the sound of strings, a man in a silver-gray robe and a large cloak appeared. Beside him, a veiled woman followed. Her face could not be more familiar, but her aura was completely different. In the sky, the divine bridge appeared on its own, as if welcoming the former master of the king's domain. From far away, Ningchen looked at the man walking towards the divine bridge. An imperceptible brilliance flashed through his deep eyes. Master of the Dawn Moon Tower, just how strong are you? At the end of the divine bridge, the Red Luan Realm King's eyes were extremely cold. The Red Luan Realm only needed one king, and that was him. Passing by, the Master of the Dawn Moon Tower looked at the person beside her. The corners of her mouth curled up. She said, "Shadow, how does it feel to become light?" "Mo Xiaoai, this is not a place for you to come," the Red Luan Realm King said in a deep voice. "Since when do I need your permission to go wherever I want to go?" The Master of the Dawn Moon Tower smiled faintly and replied softly. Then she stepped forward. All the strong cultivators arrived. Half a day later, the Wuji banquet began to welcome all the guests. In front of the palace, the Red Luan Realm King sat on the main seat at the end of the stairs. During the banquet, Overlord Jinxi, the Heaven Speaker, Master Mo, and the Master of the Dawn Moon Tower sat in pairs at the front of the crowd. Their noble status was self-evident. The banquet was extremely luxurious. All kinds of rare dishes were constantly served. The exotic fragrance assailed the nostrils. They had never seen anything like this before. Ning Chen and Qi Huan sat next to each other. Among the strong cultivators, they could be considered to be at the front. It was clear that the Mahist sect's status was not to be underestimated, even in the entire Red Luan realm. Beside Ningchen, Inba was happily eating. She ignored everyone's gazes and ate her own food. The sumptuous dishes were very tempting. The little girl's mouth was stuffed like a bun. Ningchen drank while quietly picking food for the little girl. He also had no interest in the greetings of the people at the banquet. Not long after, the Red Luan Realm King and the Red Luan Realm King walked over together and greeted the guests one by one. After a brief exchange of glances, Ningchen looked at the two people walking up the stairs. The indifference in his eyes became more and more intense. At the front of the banquet, two people came and toasted Master Mo and the others. Overlord Jinxi, the Heaven Speaker, and Master Mo accepted their toasts one by one. However, when it came to the Master of the Dawn Moon Tower, they stopped. At the banquet, the Master of the Dawn Moon Tower did not reach out to accept their toasts. A faint smile appeared on her face as she said, "Before drinking this cup of wine, I would like to know who among the two of you is going to pay for the sword slash on Hong Luan's face." As soon as her words fell, the atmosphere suddenly stagnated. On the main seat, the Red Luan Realm King's expression darkened as he said, "Master of the Dawn Moon Tower, today's banquet is to welcome the distinguished guests of the king's domain. Don't go too far." "Am I going too far? Compared to the means of the Realm King, I am still far inferior. A debt must be repaid and a life must be paid with a life. I have already restrained my emotions. Don't make me lose my last bit of patience," the Master of the Dawn Moon Tower said with a smile. "Arrogant." The Red Luan Realm King was furious. He slammed the table and stood up. Looking at the former, his expression was extremely furious. "I wonder how Master of the Dawn Moon Tower will repay us," the Red Luan Realm King said calmly. "Simple. Choose one of you and let me slash him once." The Master of the Dawn Moon Tower said playfully. "What if we don't agree?" the Red Luan Realm King asked indifferently. "Ah." The Master of the Dawn Moon Tower lightly smiled and said, "Then it's even simpler. Although I haven't fought for a long time, it shouldn't take much effort to kill the two of you." Chapter 639. The atmosphere at the Wuji banquet was stagnant. The words of the Waning Moon House Master shocked all the cultivators present, their faces filled with disbelief. Nobody had heard much about the Waning Moon House Master, but she was able to sit side by side with Lord Mo and Emperor Jinxi, which made everyone secretly pay attention to her. No one would have thought that the most inconspicuous person among the four would shock everyone with a single word. Provoking the Red Luan King's domain in front of all the cultivators in the world, this was the first time such a person had appeared in thousands of years. Although the Red Luan King's domain had gradually stepped down from its peak after the collapse of the Western Celestial World, It was definitely not as simple as it appeared to be on the surface. At this moment, all the cultivators were looking at the Red Lawn King's domain. Someone had provoked the king's domain. As the lord of the king's domain, how should he respond? On the main seat, the Red Lawn King's face became gloomier and gloomier. His powerful aura kept shaking, obviously reaching the limit of his patience. Sitting down, Lord Emo picked up his wine cup and took a sip. No change could be seen in his eyes. He didn't say anything, quietly watching the development of the situation. Opposite him, Emperor Jinsi glanced at the Red Lawn King and the Waning Moon House Master, then looked away without saying anything. The last of the four, the only woman, the Heaven Speaker, closed her eyes and said softly, "With the House Master's dignity, why do you have to make things difficult for two juniors?" The Waning Moon House Master smiled faintly and said, "I'm not making things difficult, I just want to seek justice. Spiritual cultivators, if there is no retribution for your evil deeds, won't your evil deeds be justified?" Hearing this, the Heaven Speaker sighed softly and didn't say anything more. "Emo Xiaowai, you are misleading the public with your lies. The king's domain can't tolerate you. Leave, otherwise you will experience the most ruthless anger of the king's domain." On the main seat, the Red Lawn King couldn't bear it anymore. He stood up and said in a low voice, "Domain King, please calm down." At this moment, an elegant voice came from afar. Along with the voice, a beautiful woman appeared. Her face was covered by a white veil, but her noble temperament couldn't hide her charm. As soon as she appeared, everyone present couldn't look away. Seeing the newcomer, the Dawn Moon Tower's master smiled. The Red Lawn's art of mind bewitching was the best in the world, and Princess Consort Yaoji had undoubtedly cultivated this art to the peak. "House Lord, the grudges of the past have been in the past for many years. Why keep brooding over it? As for the grudges of the younger generation, isn't it better to let them settle it themselves?" Princess Yaoji looked at the former and said softly, "Heh." The Dawn Moon Tower's master chuckled and said, "Princess Consort, we haven't seen each other for many years, but you're still as eloquent as before. Hong Wan isn't good at martial arts, and if she were to settle it herself, I'm afraid she wouldn't be able to fight for justice for herself in this lifetime. The rules of the king's domain have been like this for thousands of years. Back then you chose to give up. Today, you shouldn't have come back and interfered with the affairs of the king's domain," said Yaoji softly. "Unfortunately, I still came back." The smile on Waning Moon Tower's master's face gradually faded as she calmly said, "Yaoji, on account of our past friendship, I can take a step back and let the younger generation settle this matter. However, it's not Hong Wan." Hearing this, Yaoji's beautiful eyes flashed and she asked, "Who is that?" "Hong Wan's husband, the 9th son of the Mahist sect," said Waning Moon Tower's master lightly. When everyone heard this, they were all shocked. Even Emoju's eyes narrowed, and he subconsciously looked at Ning Chen who was below the seats. "9th junior brother, is it true?" Beside the seat, Chi Huan asked in shock. Ning Chen quietly drank a cup of wine. His deep eyes didn't change at all. He didn't say a word, nod, or deny it. "Master Mo, is this true?" asked the Realm King Hong Wan in the main seat. "I don't interfere in the affairs of the younger generation." Master Mo retracted his gaze and said calmly, "Martial artists compete, swordsmen compete. It's fair and just." Overlord Jinsi, the leader of the four, put down his wine cup and spoke for the first time. It was hard to stop halfway. The Realm King Hong Wan's face darkened and he quickly weighed the pros and cons in his heart. Waning Moon Tower's master came prepared. Once she made trouble, even if the king's domain could win, they would have to pay a heavy price. Such a result was not what he wanted to see. However, if he followed Waning Moon Tower's master's words and let the younger generation settle it themselves, the dignity of the king's domain would be placed on the princess or the prince consort. The king's domain couldn't lose, especially in front of so many witnesses. "Princess." Thinking of this, the Realm King Hong Wan looked at the princess and said, "You will fight this battle." Princess Hong Wan accepted the order softly. Hearing the former's decision, Waning Moon Tower's master smiled faintly and said, "Realm King, do you know why you can only be a shadow?" Touched again, the Realm King Hong Wan's face darkened. His suppressed anger was on the verge of erupting again. "Prince Consort, you will fight this battle," said Yaoji at this moment. "Yes." Beside the princess, the phoenix figure, who had been silent all this time, nodded. Waning Moon Tower's master didn't hide her smile and said, "It seems that in terms of boldness, you are not as good as a woman. It's meaningless to argue." Waning Moon Tower's master must have made a decision. The location of this battle must be in the king's domain. "As for the time, it's up to you," said Yaoji calmly. "Okay." Waning Moon Tower's master nodded and said, 3 days later, at the Sun and Moon Lake of the king's domain, we will settle our old grudges." Then Waning Moon Tower's master stood up and said softly, "Hong Wan, let's go." Hong Wan nodded and left together. The moment they passed each other, Hong Wan looked at the black-clothed young man who had helped her before. A trace of undetectable shyness flashed through her beautiful eyes and disappeared in an instant. In front of her, Waning Moon Tower's master didn't look back and said indifferently, "Hong Wan, demons have no feelings. This is only a transaction and nothing more." Hearing the voice transmission by her ear, Hong Wan softly responded and soon after silently followed him. After Waning Moon Tower's master left, everyone at the banquet was still unable to calm down. Everyone could see that the Realm King Hong Wan was very afraid of Waning Moon Tower's master. Otherwise, they wouldn't have agreed to this battle. On the throne, the Realm King Hong Wan's expression was ice-cold. His aura gradually disappeared and killing intent kept jumping in the depths of his eyes. "I'll take my leave." Sitting down, Yaoji bowed and didn't stay any longer. She turned and left. The banquet quickly dispersed and everyone left one after another with different thoughts. Before leaving, they all looked at the red-clothed young man beside Princess Hong Wan. Without a doubt, the prestige of the Realm King Hong Wan had already suppressed this person. The Realm King Hong Wan couldn't afford to lose this battle. However, it was rumored that the prince consort of the Realm King Hong Wan possessed the inheritance of the phoenix and his sword cultivation was even more astonishing. Although he hadn't reached perfection, his true battle strength was close to treading deities. It was also because of this that Princess Hong Wan fell in love with him. In comparison, Mo clan's 9th son was much more low-key. Other than knowing that he was Master Mo's 9th disciple, the outside world didn't know anything else about him. After everyone dispersed, Ning Chen held Yin Er's hand and left the banquet. Before leaving, their gazes crossed each other emotionlessly. Chapter 640. In the Sun and Moon Lake of the Red Luan King's realm, the water was connected to the sky. Today, Feng Mo was going to fight a battle of life and death. In the pavilion at the center of the lake, Hong Yi sat quietly with her eyes closed. Her aura circulated around her, and a black divine sword was placed in front of her. Her sword intent was unstoppable. Outside the Sun and Moon Lake, many experts appeared. Every one of them was at the absolute perfection realm, and their powerful auras covered the sky. The battle was about to start, and the air pressure on the lake dropped. Ripples appeared on the lake's surface, spreading hundreds of meters away. In the sky, 5 extremely powerful auras appeared. The 5 strongest experts in the world had appeared to watch the battle. On the other side, Queen Hong Wan also appeared. Her beautiful eyes looked at the figure in red in the center of the lake with a serious expression. After waiting for a long time, the sound of wind suddenly came from afar, and a black-clothed figure walked over. His sword intent was restrained, and he didn't have the aura of a cultivator. Only his deep eyes were sharp. Finally, he's here. In the sky, the Dawn Moon Tower's master smiled. Her silver-gray robe fluttered in the wind, and she looked extraordinary. Not far away, Master Mo's eyes flashed. He also wanted to see how strong Old Ninth's sword was. "Sister Hong Wan, hurry up." Outside the Sun and Moon Lake, pulled Hong Wan and ran over to watch the battle. Under everyone's gaze, the black-clothed figure walked over and stepped on the lake's surface. In an instant, the calm Sun and Moon Lake finally changed. Huge waves rolled, unable to withstand the sword's might. "I've made you wait for a long time." The demon opened his mouth and waved his hand. Green light bloomed, shocking the world. In the pavilion, Hong Yi stood up, and sword intent surged out from her body. On the lake's surface, the huge waves separated and a sword path appeared. Please. As soon as she finished speaking, the two figures started fighting. The two disappeared in an instant, and their swords collided. When the battle started, the water on the sun and moon lake surged into the sky. In the light of the water, two figures, one black and one red, continuously intertwined. There was no testing of moves and no mercy. When the battle started, it became white-hot. The two people with different appearances had the same sword intent. Their battle strength reached the peak of their lives. The current on their swords stole the light of the sun and the moon. The entire sun and moon lake turned into a world of swords. Sword chi surged, destroying mountains and seas. Outside the battle, the spectators could not hide the shock on their faces as they watched the battle. They were all consummation mortal sovereigns, and they were all shocked by the might and pressure from the two swords. There are actually two people with such swords in the world. In the void, Overlord Jinsi looked at the two figures in the battle and exclaimed in admiration. On the other side, Mo Zhu's eyes flickered as he watched the battle. Of Mo Gate's disciples, all 9 had followed him for the shortest amount of time, and was also the most low-key one. He rarely spoke, and unless it was the day of his apprenticeship, he would never come to wordlessness peak again. After today's battle, he finally understood that his disciple's strength had far exceeded his imagination. On the other side, the heaven speaker, whose eyes were still closed, spread out his divine sense to observe the battle. Strange. A moment later, the heaven speaker frowned and murmured softly. She felt that the existence of these two people was not ordinary. Spiritualist, did you see anything? The waning moonhouse master looked at the woman beside her and smiled. Not yet. The heaven speaker shook his head. Heh. The waning moon tower's mistress smiled faintly and said, since you can't tell, then just focus on watching the battle. A sword like this is rare even in the treading immortal realm. The heaven speaker nodded and did not say anything else. At the center of the lake, waves surged as the battle between the two became more and more intense. Below the battle, one formation after another awakened. The formation runes flickered and blocked the shock waves of the battle. In front of the spectators, In-er's face was filled with nervousness. She did not even blink, afraid that she would miss a single moment. The two people in the battle constantly intertwined with each other. The sword light that could not be seen clearly was like a winding path to the underworld. Why was there such hatred? Perhaps it was because their trust in each other had been shattered, or perhaps it was because they were disappointed in themselves. The killing intent on the demon body's sword grew thicker and thicker. Heaven fall. The sword entered the void, and the sky became the sword. Sword light fell like rain, unable to be dodged as it engulfed Hong-yi. Eastern sunrise. As the sword rain fell, Mo Kuang's sword intent spread out from the phoenix body's hand. A blood-colored divine sun rose, its brilliance illuminating the world and shaking the heavenfall sword. When the two sides collided, the sky fell and the earth fell. The waterfall was chaotic, and huge waves surged into the sky, turning into rain. Phoenix, today, you will pay the most painful price for your stupidity. The demon body waved his sword, and the power of the Sun Sutra rose around him. Instantly, the entire Sun-Moon Lake was filled with a sea of fire. Mo Kuang squinted his eyes. His unattainable ninth sun had actually merged the fire of the Feng Shui Forbidden Land into his body. The heavenly fire burned the world, refining the phoenix body. The demon body was emotionless and wanted to completely devour the phoenix who had forgotten the past. The phoenix body focused and released the phoenix fire. The blood-colored flames rose, resisting the might of the heavenly fire. The opposing flames devoured each other. In the waves of fire, the two bodies passed each other again. The swords clashed again, reaching white heat. The phoenix body stepped forward, and his figure was like an illusion. Red light shone around his body as he moved at full speed. The phoenix body was extremely fast, and the tip of the sword drew blood on the demon body. Sword after sword, it was dazzling. The demon body waved his sword to block the attacks. Although he had part of the phoenix origin, His speed was still slightly inferior to the phoenix body. In the rapid exchange, he blocked a sword and was hit. Blood bloomed. The situation of the battle changed. The demon body's sword momentum changed. He abandoned speed and used strength to suppress extreme speed. After the exchange, there were thousands of aftershocks. A waterfall soared into the sky and drowned the two bodies. Fourth sword, River of Forgetfulness. In the waves, the demon body gathered his energy and absorbed the death aura in the world. The water energy churned and merged into his sword. The River of Forgetfulness crossed the sky, and Taishi opened the road to the underworld. Seeing that the incoming attack was extraordinary, the phoenix body gathered 9 suns. 9 divine suns spiraled into the sky and illuminated the world. In the next moment, the two attacks collided. The formation outside the battle collapsed, and the aftershocks spread out in all directions. Seeing this, the Dawn Moon Tower Master took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Hong Luan and Yin. She waved her right hand and dispersed the aftershock. In other directions, the sovereigns of the Perfection Realm flashed and retreated 100 feet, avoiding the sharp sword light. Princess Hong Luan turned her palm to block the sword light. She was not willing to take a step back. She looked at Red in the battle and did not want to hide the worry on her face. Drip. In the sky above the center of the lake, a drop of blood fell into the water. It was so light that it could not be heard. The two bodies that stood at the peak of the mountain, the hands that held the swords, were dyed red. Blood flowed down along the edge of the swords, silently pouring down. At the same time, in the inner world, 100 miles away from the forbidden land of the human realm in Wanqing Pass, a figure in green walked over. He looked at the forbidden land created by Ji Ming in the distance. There was no change in his calm eyes. In front of the forbidden land, a girl stood quietly. Drops of dew wet her long hair. She had been standing there for a long time. Maybe a day, maybe a month, or maybe a year. Soon, a familiar sword aura approached. The girl looked back and saw the person. She was startled at first, but then a bright smile appeared on her face. Senior. Seeing the girl in front of the forbidden land, Prince Yan's calm face showed gentleness. He said, "Why are you here? Why didn't you go to Sky Beyond to find him?" "I want to help him pull out this sword." A man looked back at the forbidden land and said softly. Prince Yan stopped and looked at the broken stone sword floating in the forbidden land. After a while, he said calmly, "I'm going to get the sword. Do you want to come with me?" "I want to go, but I don't want to be a burden to you," a man said honestly. "Ah." Prince Yan chuckled and said, "It's okay. Let's go." A man smiled happily. She helped him carry the sword and followed him. In the fairy execution forbidden land, sword light flashed and covered the sky. It was a terrifying forbidden land formed by the power of the earth veins. In the past, in order to resist the invasion of Tianfu, Ji Ming used the fairy execution sword to form the forbidden land. He killed 30% of Tianfu's army and several perfected human sovereigns. Their blood dyed Wanqing Pass. However, after the forbidden land was formed, the fairy execution sword could no longer be pulled out. Wanqing Pass also became a forbidden land that separated the north and south of Zhongzhou. No one dared to approach it. Today, a legend was asked by Ji Ming to appear in the forbidden land to retrieve the fairy execution sword. In the forbidden land where the sun couldn't shine, the green and red swords flew out and turned into a stream of swords to protect a man. In front of them, Prince Yan walked forward step by step. The legend of the Xia dynasty, the legend of the Eastern region swordsman, reappeared in the ancient times. The invincible fairy execution sword Qi blocked the king's sword and couldn't move forward at all. In the center of the forbidden land, a broken stone sword that was neither gold nor jade was stabbed into the ground. Its terrifying aura surged and its power kept increasing. The fairy execution sword was a ferocious sword that was famous throughout the 3 ancient times. It guarded the Eastern deity world for hundreds of thousands of years and killed countless people. However, with the collapse of the 4 deity worlds, the fairy execution sword was also severely damaged. Its blade was broken and there were countless cracks. Even so, the power of the ferocious sword wasn't something that could be stopped by humans. One sword turned the forbidden land and buried tens of thousands of soldiers. The name of the fairy execution sword was domineering. The king's sword was a ferocious sword. Today, the king of swords walked forward step by step. He had handsome eyebrows and bright eyes. His young face was calm and peaceful. The sword intent around him was endless, suppressing the ancient ferocious sword. The king held the sword. The fairy execution sword's aura rumbled and the sword was pulled out. "Ah man," said Prince Yen. Hearing that, Ah man understood. She put down the sword rack and retreated a few steps. Prince Yen waved his hand. The fairy execution sword flew into the rack. In an instant, the four swords hummed together. The rumbling sword intent sealed the fairy execution sword. The ferocious sword stopped. In the forbidden land, the gloomy sword intent quickly retracted. The murderous aura dissipated. After a few years, peace returned. Prince Yen glanced at the green coffin not far away. After thinking for a while, he waved his hand and put it away. Then he walked out of the forbidden land. A man followed him, carrying the sword rack on her back. "Senior, did he find a way to come back to life?" asked a man. "No," answered Prince Yen. "Something happened to Sister Qing Ning," said a man. "She was a bit depressed." "I already know." Prince Yen nodded. When they met in the Western deity world, the demon didn't say anything, but Prince Yen couldn't see any of the past emotions in his eyes. Ning Chen was a sentimental person. Unless he suffered an irreparable blow, he wouldn't completely abandon his emotions and fall into the demon path. "I want to go find him," said a man softly. "First, come with me to the homeland of the Western Buddhas. You need to understand some things," said Prince Yen calmly. Chapter 641. In the Red Luan realm, on the Sun and Moon Lake, waves soared into the sky. The battle of the Phoenix demon had reached its most critical moment. The Phoenix body was extremely fast, unparalleled in the world. With a sword in hand, her figure constantly moved, and it was difficult to distinguish. Every strike was deadly. On the other hand, the demon body was at a disadvantage in terms of speed. She gave up on speed, and her sword was as heavy as a mountain. Every move could destroy mountains and seas, and split the earth. The battle of strength and speed was at its peak. The Phoenix demon swept past, and the strange light of the two swords collided. The clouds moved against the pressure, and the unparalleled martial arts of the sword surpassed the limits of the realm, reaching the peak of the sword. Outside the battle, the human supremes all looked solemn, shocked by the two people in the battle. At the front, Queen Hongluan clenched her fists. The battle a few days ago was stopped not long ago. She did not expect the sword of the Mahist sect's ninth son to be so powerful. On the other side, was also very nervous. She stared at the battle with her big eyes, unwilling to move away for a moment. "I didn't expect that a peak half-venerable could have such ability. The future of these two is limitless." Empress Jean, she commented from the void above. "Empress, who do you think will win?" Beside her, the Dawn Moon Tower Master, who was dressed in a silver-gray robe, smiled. "One is at the peak, and the other is at the chaotic return to void." "It's possible who will win," Empress Jean, she replied. "To have such terrifying attainments in the sword at such a young age, the younger generation will surpass us in time," the Dawn Moon Tower Master said with a smile. Empress Jean, she nodded and said, "Tower Master's insight is admirable. I didn't expect you to discover such a genius in the sword first." The Waning Moon Brothel's mistress faintly smiled and said, "Compared to Master Mo, I am ashamed of my inferiority. Every single one of the disciples of the Mahist sect can be called a genius. Ning Chen is only one of them." Not far away, Master Mo's face did not change at all when he heard this. He said, "Tower Master, you flatter me. Ninth son is introverted and doesn't like to talk. I don't know much about his strength. Today's situation has shocked me as much as you all." On the other side, the Red Luan Realm Queen heard the three's conversation. She could not help but frown as she looked at the battle. Her face became more and more serious. At this moment, an elegant and otherworldly figure walked over from afar. Her face was covered by a light veil, and her beauty carried a trace of charm, causing her to be extremely striking. Seeing the newcomer, the Dawn Moon House Master's lips curled up slightly. She didn't say anything and turned her attention back to the battle. On the Sun and Moon Lake, red and black clothes continuously intertwined. The aftershocks shook the surroundings, and 100 zhang tall waves surged and fell like rain. With a single glance, the sound of 1,000 swords rang out. The black-robed man stopped in his tracks. His sword fingers slashed out, causing the scorching heat to surge and spread out endlessly. The 100 suns returned to the east. The moves of the sun scripture appeared for the first time in the world. In an instant, the world seemed to be on fire. Divine suns circled in the sky, shocking everyone present. Seeing this, the phoenix body's expression turned solemn. Taking a step forward, the sword of Tsonglio guided the azure stream, and the 4 symbols deity sealing sword appeared once again. The two extremes shone at the same time. The might of the sword shook the heaven and earth. Within 100 miles, the sword will rumbled and flames surged. The sword's sun and dragon sparrow collided. With a shocking explosion, the heaven and earth sank. In the Sun and Moon Lake, the lake water turned into white mist and instantly dried up. Sword rain fell, and the earth rumbled and cracked. Blood splattered, and the phoenix body retreated a few zhang. The blood did not stop flowing, and the sword did not stop either. The azure dragon coiled and appeared in the world. 4 symbols deity sealing sword, heavenly dragon shakes. The appearance of the angry dragon stirred up tens of thousands of waves. The azure dragon soared through the sword and pressed forward with a murderous aura. The demon body waved his sword to block the attack. The corners of his mouth turned red, and he retreated a few steps. The phoenix body's advantage appeared for the first time. In an instant, the sword light was like rushing thunder. It was too fast for the eyes to take in. Having lost the initiative, the demon body immediately felt the pressure multiplying. He was restrained in every move. Oh! Outside the battle, the Dawn Moon House Master looked surprised. The prince consort of Princess Hong Wan was indeed extraordinary. He could actually forcefully suppress the battle. A difference of 1 move. It seems like the outcome is about to be decided, Overlord Jinsi said. Not necessarily, the Dawn Moon House Master replied. The two of them are equal in strength. Now that the 9th son of Mahist's sect has lost the initiative, it will be difficult to turn the situation around, Overlord Jinsi said calmly. On the side, Mo Kuang was silent. After a while, he slowly said, "The 9th son still has a sword in his hand." As soon as he finished speaking, the battle changed. The demon body's left hand clenched, and a white rainbow appeared. The mournful sound of the sword resounded for 100 li. Mo Kuang and the white rainbow collided. The white rainbow wrapped around the phoenix body, and its speed was immediately restrained. Sky Breaker. In an instant, the demon body slashed with Taisher, and a dazzling sword light whistled through the air. The phoenix body blocked the sword light with its fingers. Its foundation was slightly weakened, and the corners of its mouth were instantly dyed red. The current you has already forgotten why the sword in your hand is dancing. You are no longer qualified to exist in this world. As soon as he finished speaking, the demon body's sword aura became heavier, and the former was pushed back. The torrent on the sword rushed to the 9th heaven. It stepped forward, trapping the enemy with one sword and attacking with the other. It was a combination of hardness and gentleness, and the unparalleled sword art appeared again. The world-shocking sword stood at the peak, infinitely close to being the only one. The phoenix body's speed was restrained, and it was at a disadvantage. What a terrifying swordsman! Outside the battle, Overlord Jinsi's eyes turned serious for the first time. The 9th son of Mo clan had really impressed him. Among the people present, except for the old monsters who had lived for hundreds of years, no one dared to say that they could suppress this person. On the other side, seeing that the battle was in danger, the Red Phoenix Realm Monarch's expression became abnormally heavy. She clenched her fists so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. Prince Consort. In front of everyone, Queen Hong Luan looked nervous, and it was difficult to hide her worry. With a ripping sound, the clothes on the phoenix body's left shoulder were torn apart, and blood splattered out. "Now, it's time for you to pay the price for your stupidity." The demon body stepped forward, and the white rainbow in its left hand locked onto the former sword. In its right hand, Taishur gathered the power of the Sun Sutra, and endless waves of fire engulfed the phoenix body. "Prince Consort." Outside the battlefield, Queen Hongluan's expression changed. She couldn't hold it in any longer. Taking a step forward, she rushed towards the battlefield. In the air, the Dawn Moon Tower Master moved at the same time. In an instant, she blocked in front of the phoenix body. Her silver-gray cloak fluttered, and the aura of a peerless expert overflowed, not allowing anyone to interfere. "Tower Master, there's only one victor in this battle. You can stop now," Princess Yaoji said as she took 2 steps forward. "When did I say that there was only one victor in this battle?" The Dawn Moon Tower Master looked at the woman in front of her and indifferently said, "Mo Xiaowai, you've repeatedly challenged the dignity of the king's realm. I cannot tolerate you." Seeing that the phoenix body's power was about to be devoured, the Red Phoenix Realm Monarch's figure descended. Vast origin energy condensed in her palm and pressed forward. "Is it finally our turn?" The Dawn Moon Tower Master coldly said. Silver strings appeared in her hand. Silver light intersected, and a profound sound descended from the heavens. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged. The water vapor in the sun-moon lake that had been evaporated by the heavenly flames condensed once more. The water roiled and 100-meter-tall wave soared into the sky. With a loud explosion, the palm energy and the profound sound collided. Terrifying shockwaves violently shook the earth. Piece after piece of land was uprooted and immediately fell back down. The shocking power caused the heavens and earth to change color. At the same time, in the inner world, in the Western Buddha's homeland, the old water railing, the place where the Taoists and demons fought in the past, everything within 100 miles was devastated. On the scorched earth that was incinerated by the demon calamity, not a single blade of grass grew. It was extremely desolate. Huge ravines crisscrossed the land. The once prosperous Pure Land was completely destroyed after the battle. In front of the old water railing, a legend appeared. Looking at the scene before him, a hint of regret flashed through his calm eyes. It was a pity that he wasn't able to see the extraordinary sword qi and the power of orthodox Taoism with his own eyes. In the remains of the Zenith Sword formation, 2 other sword intents filled the place. One of them was very familiar. It was left behind by Ningqian. The other one was very unfamiliar. He had never seen it before. Feeling the sword intents in the heavens and earth, Prince Yan's eyes regained their calmness. He already knew about the heavenly abode. If he guessed correctly, the last sword intent was the sword of the heavenly abode sword master. The 11th sword is truly a perfect move that exhausts the limits of human strength. After saying that, Prince Yan didn't stay any longer. He continued walking forward. Wild followed him with his sword on his back. He glanced at the remains of the battle one last time. A hint of sadness flashed through his eyes. His sword no longer had any emotions. Everyone has their own path. Humans and demons walk different paths, but in the end, they all return to the same place. "There's no need to feel sad for him," said Prince Yan. "Yes." Wild came back to his senses and nodded. Half a day later, the 2 of them arrived at the West Jade Mountain. At the peak of the clear sky Lotus Mountain, the West Jade Lord felt a powerful sword pressure from afar. He opened his eyes and took a step forward, disappearing from the Lotus Mountain. In the next moment, the legend and the Bodhisattva met. The atmosphere was calm. There wasn't a hint of killing intent. "Grand Xia Prince Yan," said the West Jade Lord. The only person who could possess such sword pressure could only be the legendary swordsman of the East who had disappeared a long time ago. "I've come to ask about what happened back then," said Prince Yan calmly. The West Jade Lord sighed and nodded. "Come with me." Yen Qin Prince nodded and followed him. At the highest point of the clear sky Lotus Mountain was the 7 Buddha Heavenly Pass. Buddhist flames soared into the air. As soon as they entered, they felt a wave of unbearable heat. The 3 of them walked forward and stopped after 100 steps. Dozens of feet ahead of them was a beautiful woman floating in the flames. Her eyes were closed, as if she were sleeping. Wild's body trembled when he saw the familiar figure in the flames. He was about to walk forward when he was stopped. "Miss, it's too dangerous up ahead. Please wait," said the West Jade Lord. Prince Yen narrowed his eyes. A Buddhist method of tempering one's body. The legend of the Grand Xia really has extraordinary knowledge. Qing Ning's body was destroyed by demonic qi and the resentment of the masses. "Only by using Buddhist flames will there be a chance," said the West Jade Lord softly. "How long will it take?" asked Prince Yen. 10 years if it's short, 100 if it's long. "Whether or not Qing Ning can survive this tribulation will depend on her luck," said the West Jade Lord. Prince Yen frowned slightly when he heard that. Everyone who participated in that battle back then was killed by the Jiming Marquis. Many large sects in the Central Plains were also massacred. A few days ago, Piaoshu was also sent to the Wall of Repentance. She won't be able to step out for 60 years. "Let's end this here," sighed the West Jade Lord softly. Prince Yen looked ahead calmly and silently. After a long time, he turned around and walked out of the cave. "If she doesn't wake up, I'll come back." The legend's last words were bone-chilling. The Buddhist flames in the Seven Buddha Heavenly Paths seemed to have weakened. Chapter 642. In the Red Luan realm, the entire sky above the Sun and Moon Lake was filled with a sea of fire. The demons were merciless as they refined the phoenix with heavenly fire and devoured its body. In front of the Sun and Moon Lake, the Dawn Moon Tower Master blocked the pass. The silver string in her hand danced, and the sound reverberated, stopping the Red Luan Realm King. The confrontation between the strongest cultivators in the world caused the sky to sink and the earth to fall. Endless waves of dust surged and swept tens of thousands of feet. Outside the battle, Master Mo, the Heaven Speaker, and Overlord Jin Shi watched quietly. No one interfered. In the heavenly fire, the phoenix was about to die. Princess Hong Luan's face was full of anxiety. She stepped forward, wanting to save the phoenix. However, the moment she passed by, the silver string flew out, and the sound was faintly discernible, blocking her way. With a bang, Princess Hong Luan was forced back several steps, unable to cross the heavenly barrier. Before this battle ends, no one is allowed to pass. In front of the battle, the Dawn Moon Tower Master stood quietly, looking at the three in front of her and saying coldly, "When I let you go back then, you've become a big problem. Mo Xiaowai, do you really want to be enemies with the King's realm?" The Red Luan Realm King said in a low voice. "Is it serious?" The Dawn Moon Tower Master said indifferently. "You're courting death." The Red Luan Realm King's expression turned cold. He clenched his right hand, and the earth shook violently. A red divine weapon rose. It was neither a saber nor a sword, and red mist lingered around it. With a clang, Qi Shao streaked across, and the void cracked. The Dawn Moon Tower Master blocked the divine weapon with her fingers, and the aftershock shook her body. The first sound of the yellow spring. The waning moon brothel mistress whispered. She waved the silver string in her hand, and in an instant, an invisible sound wave spread out. An extremely terrifying and destructive pressure appeared. Everywhere it passed, the earth crumbled, and the heavens and earth grieved. The Red Luan Realm King's expression changed slightly. He stepped back, and Qi Shao condensed his essence to block the sound of the yellow spring. "Ah!" With a muffled groan, he retreated several steps. The sound entered his body, and the Red Luan Realm King's mouth was dyed red. He was injured for the first time. Qi Shao trembled. Affected by the sound, cracks appeared on the divine weapon, showing signs of collapse. The Red Luan Realm Monarch's expression sank. She used her blood to replenish her weapon, and the cracked blade recovered in an instant. "Oh!" Seeing this, the Dawn Moon Brothel Mistress let out a soft cry of surprise and slowly said, "A bloodline symbiotic weapon. Unfortunately, it is useless against me." As soon as she finished speaking, the waning Moon Tower's mistress moved for the first time since the battle began. She took a step forward and pointed at the former's chest. The Red Luan Realm King's pupils constricted as Qi Shao moved to block in front of her. An almost undetectable soft sound appeared. A crack line once again appeared on the crimson cloud. It swiftly spread before it shattered with a bang. As the divine weapon shattered, the realm king of the Red Luan realm was severely injured. The corners of his mouth were dyed red. His clothes were dyed red. The realm king of the Red Luan realm endured his injuries and forcefully counterattacked. The blood light surged and swallowed everything. The Dawn Moon brothel master frowned slightly. She took a step back and retreated 10 feet away. At this moment, the white silk moved horizontally and vertically. It was soft but firm as it wrapped around the former. The waning moon tower mistress waved her hand and shook off the white silk. She looked at the woman not far away and said calmly, "Yaoji, it's not gentlemanly to stab someone in the back. I'm just a woman. How can I act like a gentleman?" Yaoji said softly. The waning moon tower mistress smiled faintly and said, "That makes sense." Yaoji looked at Princess Hong Luan and said, "Hong Luan, you go and save them. The realm king and I will block him." Princess Hong Luan nodded. She took a step forward and rushed towards the battle. At the same time, Yaoji and the realm king of the Red Luan realm joined hands. Their vigorous true essence covered the sky. I already said that before this battle ends, no one is allowed to go over. The waning moon tower mistress calmly said. She took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Princess Hong Luan. Her silver string swung and a dazzling silver light blasted the ladder back. 7 rulings of the Yellow Spring, judgment of the third night. The mysterious sound rang out again. The King of Hell received the order. A shocking pressure spread out and attacked the 3 people again. Yaoji's eyes narrowed. The white silk rolled and turned into a barrier in front of her. With a violent tremor, the white silk shattered. The realm king of the Red Luan realm flashed past and pressed his palm towards the chest of the person in front of him. The waning moon tower mistress turned her palm to block the attack. She blocked one palm and was hit by another. Silently, a trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Music is indeed not suitable for battle. The waning moon tower mistress's palm exploded with true essence. She raised her hand and wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Then she waved her left hand and a stream of light wrapped around a green cloth appeared. Her aura shook and the green cloth shattered. A green spear appeared in the waning moon tower mistress's right hand and the blade of the spear appeared. She put her hands together and the yellow spring appeared. The waning moon tower mistress's aura was like an unsheathed sword. Her silver cloak fluttered in the wind. Her sharp aura was hard to look at. "Come, let me see how much you've improved in the past 100 years." The yellow spring was in her hand and the King of Hell was judging them. The waning moon tower mistress looked at the 2 people in front of her and said indifferently. Her words were casual and did not carry any threat. The true king of the Red Luan realm showed his peerless aura for the first time. His eyes were indifferent as he looked down on the world. Yaoji's expression froze. Without a doubt, Mo Shaoai was the most likely person to enter the true realm or even the 4th realm in the past 1,000 years. If he had not left the king's domain, no one would have been able to take the realm king's position. On the other side, after 100 years, the Red Luan realm monarch couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. With a deep roar, the true yuan around his body surged. "Star Slayer!" The king summoned. In the depths of the Red Luan realm, a red stream of light flashed. Red mist curled around it, splitting the sky and the earth. It was the treasure of the king's domain, the heaven weapon Star Slayer. The Red Luan realm king held the sword and rushed forward. The heaven weapon and the yellow spring collided. The 2 peerless weapons of the king's domain clashed again after 100 years. In the earth-shattering collision, the sky and the earth collapsed. Huge waves surged into the sky. The terrifying shock waves continued to spread, destroying one realm-protecting formation after another. Yaoji saw this and jumped forward. She gathered her true essence and helped the Red Luan realm king. The waning moon tower mistress's expression did not change. The yellow spring turned and shook the heaven weapon away. Yaoji leaned to the side and avoided the yellow spring divine spear. The white silk appeared again and wrapped around the spear. The Red Luan realm king saw this and stepped forward. The heaven weapon was about to kill. 100 years ago, I said that if you did not have the courage to face me alone, you would never surpass me. Today, I see that your growth has disappointed me. The waning moon tower mistress let go of the spear. The spear spun rapidly and wrapped the white silk. She pushed with her left hand and the yellow spring opened a path. Yaoji, it's better for a woman to be less scheming. If you use up all your tricks, you will end up ruining your life. The yellow spring returned. The waning moon tower mistress grabbed the spear and pulled it. A powerful palm imprinted on the woman's left shoulder. With a bang, blood splattered. Yaoji's body flew back and she vomited blood. The unbelievable battle situation and the complete suppression shocked everyone present. No one would have thought that the man in the gray cloak in front of them would be so powerful. At this moment, terrifying auras awakened in the depths of the Red Luan realm. Each aura was no weaker than the corporeal realm. In the next moment, the void swirled and two withered figures appeared. Shocking pressure swept across hundreds of miles. Sixth ancestor, seventh ancestor. Queen Hongwan was shocked. The waning moon tower mistress sneered when she saw the two appear. They had come in the end. Mo Xiao, since you chose to leave the king's domain, you shouldn't have come back, said the seventh ancestor. Where I go is not up to you to decide, said the waning moon tower mistress coldly. Unrepentant. The seventh ancestor's expression turned cold. He flipped his palm and condensed yuan. In an instant, a large hand appeared and slapped down. Stop! At this moment, an extremely ancient voice rang out. The wind and clouds stirred and instantly dispersed the former's palm power. Third ancestor. Hearing the person who spoke, the seventh ancestor and sixth ancestor's expressions turned solemn and respectful. Don't mourn. 100 years have passed. It doesn't matter who was right or wrong. Let it go, said the ancient voice in the sky. The waning moon tower mistress smiled faintly and said, what happened 100 years ago is not worth mentioning. The one who really can't let it go is not me. Third ancestor, it's only been 100 years and you seem to have aged a lot. Who doesn't get old without reincarnation? I've lived for too long and have no regrets. Don't mourn. Since you've come back, come and see us old guys. Perhaps there won't be a chance next time. As soon as he finished speaking, the wind and clouds dissipated and everything returned to normal. The waning moon tower mistress looked at the depths of the king's domain. Her calm eyes narrowed slightly. In the void, the seventh and sixth ancestors snorted coldly, and their figures faded away, disappearing from sight. Outside the battle, the crowd had yet to recover from their shock. Suddenly, they felt an unprecedented sword pressure sweep out. It was so majestic that it made their hearts tremble. It was endless and boundless as it soared into the sky. Above the sun and moon lake, within the heavenly fire, the cry of a phoenix resounded through the 9 heavens. A huge phantom of a phoenix appeared between heaven and earth. The phoenix, which had almost been completely refined, suddenly opened its eyes and its aura rose rapidly. The phoenix bathed in fire and was reborn. It was a god of fire. It absorbed all the power of the heavenly fire around it and instantly broke through the restriction of the underworld in the divine sense. Memories flooded in. The phoenix's eyes became clear again. Without any hesitation, it cut off the tribulation of love. In an instant, its body broke through the limits of the realm and stepped into the realm of consummation. Welcome back. Feeling the change in the phoenix, the demon spoke calmly. Thank you. The phoenix body responded. It took a step forward and soared into the 9 heavens. The ink in its hand danced about as incomparably beautiful sword light gushed forth from all directions. There was no beginning and no end, it was boundless and endless. This world-shocking scene shocked everyone present. Nirvana. The sword of Nirvana reappeared. The sword light broke through the sky like a rainstorm, cutting through heaven and earth. The last move went beyond the limit. Wherever the sword flow passed, space collapsed. It was a horrifying scene. The demon's expression turned serious. The white rainbow in its left hand absorbed the power of the underworld. The Tai Shi in its right hand condensed the extreme yang. The yin and yang opened the formation. The yin and yang reappeared. The Tai Chi formation rose into the 9 heavens. Yin and Yang interchanged endlessly. In the next moment, the two extremes collided. The magnificent sword flow broke into the Yin and Yang sword formation. The sword light collided and consumed a lot of energy. A rumbling sound was heard. The extreme sword power spread. Hundreds, thousands of miles away, only the sound of the sword was heard. In the sword flow, the waning Moon Tower Master quickly retreated within and Hong Luan to avoid the sword power of the last sword. On the other side, the Red Luan Realm King and others also quickly retreated from the center of the battle. They did not want to be affected by the terrifying sword power. In the blink of an eye, the center of the battle erupted with dazzling brilliance. The last sword power spread out and swallowed everything. Chapter 643. On the Sun and Moon Lake, there were raging waves. After the last move, the battle stopped. In the pouring rain, two figures appeared. The two of them, who were on opposite ends of the spectrum, stood at the peak together. "It's a draw." The eyes of the spectators flashed as they asked, "You let me win." The demon said calmly, then turned around and left. Outside the battle, let go of Hong Luan's hand and trotted after him. What a breathtaking battle of swords! Seeing the end of the battle, Emperor Jinsi sighed with emotion. Unfortunately, it's not over yet. The waning Moon Tower Master smiled. If the battle continued, it would be a life and death battle. The atmosphere is not right, Emperor Jinsi said. The waning Moon Tower Master smiled faintly and glanced at the woman beside her. "Hong Luan, let's go." Hong Luan nodded. The two of them walked together. When they passed by the Realm King and Yaoji, the waning Moon Tower Master paused and smiled. "When the Realm King gets married, I will attend the wedding. Goodbye." After that, the waning Moon Tower Master walked out of the king's domain. On the Sun and Moon Lake, the phoenix body waved his hand and withdrew his sword. The sword intent on his body was completely restrained. No one could feel it anymore. Queen Hong Luan stepped forward and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," the phoenix body said calmly. In the distance, the Realm King Hong Luan looked at the red-robed young man in the center of the lake. After a while, he turned and left. "Come to the Drizzle Pavilion to see me later." Yaoji transmitted her voice. Then she faded and disappeared from the Sun and Moon Lake. What an incredible young man. In the sky, Emperor Jinsi looked at the Sun and Moon Lake that was destroyed by the battle and sighed. Then he stepped out and left as well. After the battle ended, all the strong cultivators left. The spectators outside the Sun and Moon Lake also left one after another. What was left was a desolate scene full of scars. An hour later, Queen Hong Luan walked over from the Drizzle Pavilion. Looking at the woman in front of the clear lake, she bowed respectfully. "What about him? Has he left the king's domain?" Yaoji asked. Queen Hong Luan nodded and said, "His realm is already there. Now he only needs to verify it. This trial won't stump him." Yaoji nodded and said, "I called you here to remind you that although it's a good thing for him to make a breakthrough in this battle, the art of mind bewitching may also change. Don't be careless and observe carefully." "Disciple understands," Princess Hong Luan replied softly. "One more thing. Do you remember why he came to the king's domain?" Yaoji asked. "Requesting the Jade Pool Divine Water," Princess Hong Luan replied. "Since you still remember, don't forget to remind yourself that his feelings for you are only due to the influence of the mind-bewitching technique. Remember your identity. Don't be influenced by your feelings and make irrational choices," Yaoji said calmly. "Yes," Princess Hong Luan replied. At the same time, in a desolate place 500 kilometers away from the Red Luan King's territory, lightning and flames covered the sky and blotted out the sun, and a myriad of bolts of lightning crisscrossed together with a terrifying might that shook the heavens and the earth. In the lightning, a red-clothed figure moved, and a black sword light rose. The sword intent was endless, and it cut a path through the lightning. 10 miles away, a black-clothed figure stood quietly, holding a cute little girl's hand, quietly watching the phoenix body go through the tribulation. "Ning Chen, can he go through it?" Her raised her head and asked. "Yes." Ningchen nodded. How do you know? Yin was puzzled. He has passed the Supreme Being tribulation. With his ability, it's more than enough to deal with this lightning tribulation, Ningchen said calmly. Oh. Hearing this, Yin was relieved. She looked at the red-clothed figure in the sea of lightning ahead and unconsciously revealed a touch of envy. Not long after, raised her head again and said expectantly, I also want to learn this dual transformation technique. When you learn the martial arts in the heavenly book, I'll teach you, Ningchen promised. Okay. Yin nodded vigorously and said. While the two of them were talking, the phoenix body had reached the great circle of perfection after severing the tribulation of emotions. Her aura had reached the peak of her life. The sea of lightning was 10,000 layers, and her sword intent was crisscrossing between heaven and earth. She had learned the sword for 30 years, and today, the knowing destiny sword had taken another step forward, peeking into the path of the sword. The path of the sword was abnormally difficult. Someone as strong as the knowing destiny sword had learned the sword at a young age under the guidance of Mu Bai and Yen Wang. Today, she had finally comprehended her own sword. The sword light in the lightning was incomparably magnificent. Even from 1,000 miles away, one could feel the sword pressure that surpassed the peak. Nirvana! Mo Kuang waved his hand, and the sword light converged. It soared into the sky and broke through the sea of lightning. There was a shocking explosion, and heaven and earth sunk. The sea of lightning collapsed, and it dissipated amidst the raging winds. A red-clothed figure walked out of the sand. Light flashed in his hand, and Mo Kuang withdrew his sword. After several breaths, the red-clothed figure arrived 10 miles away. Looking at the two figures, one big and one small, a smile appeared on his calm face. Demonic body Yin, long time no see. What's wrong with your face? Looked at the former and asked. It's just a technique. The phoenix body waved its hand, and its face changed back to its original appearance. The two bodies of the mirror body had the same face. The only difference was the brilliance in their eyes. One was as calm as water, and the other was as dark as an abyss, cold and emotionless. I need an explanation, said the demonic body indifferently. To obtain the Jade Lake divine water. The phoenix body calmly said, when I came to the Red Luan King's domain to obtain the Jade Lake divine water, the Realm King saw the phoenix origin in my body. The Red Luan Realm King proposed that I stay in the king's domain until the day the god's domain opened. I would exchange my phoenix blood for the Jade Lake divine water. Did the Red Luan Realm King go back on his word? Asked the demonic body coldly. The phoenix body nodded. The Red Luan Realm King wanted to keep the phoenix origin in the king's domain forever, so he asked Princess Hong Luan to act. You have the fastest speed in the world. Even if you can't defeat him, how can you not escape? Love tribulation. The phoenix body slowly spat out 2 words. The demonic body had heard this before, and his eyes narrowed. As expected, none of them could avoid the love tribulation, the demonic tribulation, and the tribulation of all beings. So, you were bewitched by Princess Hong Luan's bewitching technique on purpose? Asked the demonic body. The phoenix body lightly replied. The love tribulation is difficult and can't be severed. I can only find another way. When Princess Hong Luan used her technique, I used the forbidden land of the underworld to seal my own memories. I fell into the bewitching technique and obtained the method to overcome the love tribulation. You have always been cautious, but you still chose such a dangerous method, said the demonic body lightly. There are many strong people in the heavens beyond heaven. If you want to find the method to resurrect the dead, you must have absolute strength. The love tribulation can't be an obstacle, said the phoenix body calmly. Can you find the whereabouts of the Jade Lake divine water? What about the god's domain? Asked the demonic body. The great void god's domain is said to be a divine land created by the Western Queen Mother. The Jade Lake divine water is there. However, the 7 ancestors Hong Luan are now in the god's domain. It's not easy to enter and find the Jade Lake divine water, replied the phoenix body. Whether it's easy or not, we must enter. Where is the entrance? Have you found out? asked the demonic body with a glint in his eyes. Yes, it's in the king's domain. The phoenix body looked at the Red Luan king's domain in the distance and said, now, the domain King Hong Luan and the others still don't know that I have recovered my memories. So now is the best chance. Take advantage of the wedding between Princess Hong Luan and the domain king's avatar. One of us will find a chance to enter the great void god's domain and find the whereabouts of the Jade Lake Divine Water as soon as possible. The demonic body thought for a while and nodded. At sunset, the sky gradually darkened in the Red Luan king's domain. In front of the flowing wind palace, Hong Yi walked over. His eyes were as deep as the abyss, without a trace of light. Seeing him, Princess Hong Luan, who had been waiting, stepped forward and asked with concern, how is it? Has your domain stabilized? Hong Yi nodded and calmly replied. Princess Hong Luan was relieved and said softly, I didn't expect the 9th son of Mahis to have such strength. The Mahis lineage is really scary. Hong Yi was silent and did not say a word. Princess Hong Luan did not find it strange and continued, in today's battle, I noticed that the 9th son of Mahist had a similar aura as you. Could it be that he had also obtained the inheritance of the phoenix? I don't know. Hong Yi simply replied. Princess Hong Luan laughed at herself. She had almost forgotten that his memories had been completely erased by her mind-bewitching technique. Even if he knew something, he had forgotten it now. Was this really what she wanted? Princess Hong Luan's heart was in a mess as her thoughts were disturbed. She suppressed her emotions and said, you must be tired. Rest first. I'm going back. Hong Yi nodded and did not say a word. Princess Hong Luan sighed in her heart and walked away. A cold wind blew past. In front of the flowing wind palace, Hong Yi stood quietly. His eyes were as dark as the abyss as he looked into the depths of the palace. Outside the king's domain, in a neighboring city, Dawn Moon Restaurant. Een Er sat alone on the first floor and ordered a large table of dishes. She ate as if there was no one around. On the first floor, there were quite a few guests. Only the little girl occupied a large table by herself. She had the best seat and the best dishes. On the second floor, in the bright room, Dawn Moon Restaurant's owner was trimming the flowers and plants as a faint smile appeared on her face. Not long after, Hong Luan walked down the first floor with a veil covering her face, covering her alluring appearance. Een Er, why are you alone? Hong Luan sat beside the little girl and gently asked. Ning Chen went to handle some matters and temporarily couldn't take care of me, so I ran over. Een Er raised her head and revealed a smile. Hong Luan was slightly surprised. Under normal circumstances, no matter where he went, Ning Chen would bring Een Er along with him. What exactly happened this time that he couldn't even take care of this little girl? Hong Luan, prepare an earth room for Miss Een Er in a while. It's free. On the second floor, Dawn Moon Restaurant's owner calmly said. Hong Luan softly replied. Thank you, restaurant master. Een Er happily smiled and said, You're welcome. Miss Een Er, feel free to stay in Dawn Moon Restaurant for as many days as you want, Dawn Moon Restaurant's owner replied. Een Er smiled and nodded. Under the table, she secretly tugged at Hong Luan's clothes. While maintaining her smile, she asked in a soft voice, Sister Hong Luan, is your black-hearted boss planning something bad? Why is he so generous? Hearing her words, Hong Luan helplessly smiled. What was this little girl thinking about? On the second floor, Dawn Moon Restaurant's owner lightly smiled and shook her head. She did not mind and continued trimming the flowers and plants in front of her. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.